The knight warned Anna to be careful. He also added that if she noticed even one sign that he had lost his temper, she needed to run away immediately. Anna, of course, was a little surprised. She never expected that they would meet again like this. Before her stood the one whom the entire empire simultaneously loved and hated, the one with whom she, being an ordinary maid, was unrequitedly in love. It was the second prince, Ivon Orpheus Cadogan. Now he looked too shabby for a man of noble blood. They probably still haven't found Ariadne. Manish and Ariadne are the only love of God. Manish was closer to a deity than to a human. He possessed a special power, incomprehensible to ordinary people, but Manish needed his companion, Ariadne. They had to recognize each other immediately, and a fateful love would blossom between them. For Manish, who could not live without Ariadne, love became both a blessing and a curse. But Anna was sure of one thing. Whoever she was, she could not become his companion. She is just one of many candidates for the role of Ariadne. Anna realized long ago that she could never be truly special to him. Even if she doesn't become it, His Highness will still find his real Ariadne, and Anna shouldn't worry. And yet, if she could ease his suffering even a little, she decided to do it anyway, and the knights noticed that light was coming from Anna. They screamed that they needed to save themselves because he was out of control. Anna didn't understand what was happening, or what it was at all. When she came to, she found herself in the arms of the second prince. Ivon smiled, looking at Anna. Anna was shocked and could not understand how all this happened. He asked why she was so late. Ivon said that a little more, and he would have killed them all. He turned to Anna and demanded that she never do that again. Anna could not leave him alone under any circumstances. After that, he kissed her passionately, and that night she became his. When it all started, the memories of that day seemed so far away. The sounds of music marked the beginning of the evening. The chandeliers sparkled like the sun on the summer solstice. There are cool drinks and all kinds of snacks all around, and the aristocrats are dressed impeccably. Anna Theodore was there and could not hide her delight. But she was just a maid and looked at what was happening from below with admiration. All these people really did resemble peacocks. Another maid came up to her and remarked that everything looked absolutely magnificent today. The royal banquets were truly wonderful. Even the maids were allowed to sit down. Natasha's personal maid, Anna's best friend, Deborah Cato. Anna agreed with her words, adding that she had heard that the ball would be luxurious, but she had not imagined that it would be to such an extent. The ball at the palace was definitely different from all the others, and this was quite understandable. The first time Deborah attended such a reception, she felt as if she could go blind from all the radiance. Anna was surprised that this was not her first ball. Deborah explained that this was indeed the case. Their lady Natasha was quite well known in high society. Count Baldwin's second daughter is Natasha Baldwin. The dress that Anna recommended fit her perfectly. Deborah also noted that their lady stood out despite the huge number of guests. Anna smiled and agreed. The thing was that their lady was so beautiful that whatever she wore, it looked gorgeous. And the outfit that Deborah recommended last time was also incredibly beautiful. After this, a gentleman approached Natasha. Natasha looked closely at her maids. Anna was a little scared. She didn't understand why the lady was looking at her with such an expression. She couldn't understand what it was. It even seemed to her that everyone around her was also looking straight at her. Perhaps she did something wrong, since the lady looked at her like that. Deborah quietly asked Anna to look more closely, because she noticed His Highness next to the lady. Anna asked again if it was really the prince, and one of the maids confirmed that the man talking to their people was indeed His Highness. He was very handsome, a fair-haired young man with a noble appearance. Anna was truly surprised. Deborah noticed that even from this distance, you could see how handsome he was. Anna, of course, agreed with her. He was so handsome that he could arouse the envy of the entire empire. Deborah said she had heard many rumors. His appearance allegedly brought many women to tears. Anna had no idea that he could be so attractive. After these words, she herself suddenly became embarrassed. This feeling was unfamiliar to her. She had never experienced anything like it before. She had never been one for looks, but her gaze was already fixed on him. Deborah, turning to her friend, asked whether Anna thought that His Highness and Lady Natasha looked very harmonious. It seems the second prince has shown interest in their mistress. Anna agreed with this, but said it somehow sadly. Ivon's bright platinum hair resembled sunbeams, and Natasha's thick hair was like dark wine glass. They looked like something out of an illustration, as if the most magnificent peacock had finally found a mate. While Anna was immersed in her yellow and confused thoughts, the prince watched her closely. She noticed this and immediately became embarrassed. Anna did not understand why His Highness Ivon was looking so intently in their direction. Their eyes met. It was unexpected and tense. At that moment, she looked straight into his eyes, which looked like blue glass beads. Anna thought that perhaps the windows of the hall were open, because at that very second, she felt a strong gust of wind, as if from nowhere. She couldn't explain what this feeling was. Everything inside was clenching. I didn't understand how her heart could beat so hard. She looked up at the prince again, but he had already turned his back to her. It seemed like a sign, although she wasn't at all sure of it. She didn't understand anything then. She thought maybe they had something on their faces, since they had just been in the bathroom. Deborah decided that the correct answer would be that he simply wanted to sit on the very same sofa where they were already sitting and relaxing. But Anna believed that he was a prince. Why would he sit on an ordinary chair where the maid sat? Deborah noted that she did not understand why she was the only one who was constantly drawing conclusions, and invited Anna to join in the thinking as well. Anna replied that she didn't even know. Perhaps it was all just a coincidence. The best way to think about it is this way. This feeling was too strong for a simple maid like her. Why think so seriously when there were more pressing concerns? Deborah hinted at Natasha. If His Highness was really interested in their lady, they could really start having big troubles. If he then leaves Lady Natasha unconscious, it will be their responsibility to console her. Anna noted that this was indeed something to worry about. His Highness Ivan's popularity was not only due to his looks. The reason he acted frivolously with girls was because the second prince was a man born in the golden age of the empire. Young girls were drawn to him like moths to a light. The longest relationships lasted 3 months, the shortest 2 weeks. This became his nickname, the embodiment of love, and at the same time, the length of his infatuation. Since things had turned out this way, they had no choice but to hope that their lady would not become too infatuated with this gentleman. Or maybe she just didn't realize what would happen if the two of them actually became interested in each other. At least one of them already was. But suddenly, they noticed that the couple was walking together and laughing very sweetly. Soon Ivon announced that he was going to visit the lady in her mansion and asked her to vacate the bedroom as promised. Natasha smiled and noted that he seemed to be trying to enter the noble lady's bedroom without further ado. The second prince reminded him that the lady herself had said that she wanted to show him a tapestry made by her own hands. Or perhaps she had something else she wanted to show him. Moreover, Ivon added that, in general, he does not object to this at all. Natasha warned him not to laugh at her, and the maids watched the proceedings with barely concealed contempt. The servants began to worry. These two looked like real lovers, even if it was all just a game. Moreover, the consequences of the storm created by these high-born persons will have to be cleaned up by them, the servants. Ivon promised that he would send a letter and hoped that she would respond to his invitation. Natasha asked how she could decline the prince's invitation, and he said that she had every right to refuse. He just hopes that her heart will make a choice not under pressure, but based on true feelings. Anna wondered if all womanizers were really that shameless. Obviously, there was hardly anyone who could resist his charm. This appearance is really very attractive. Suddenly, he looked out the window. There, with Natasha, sat the maid Annie. She noticed that she caught his gaze again. And then Ivon said that he would just wait for Natasha. Natasha promised that she would wait for his letter. Anna couldn't understand how he could shine so openly on his face. The moment he looked into the carriage, she couldn't take her eyes off him. Natasha told the maids that he complimented her dress. She meant that His Highness remarked that she had a very capable maid. Then Anna decided that this was the very reason why he looked at her like that. She said she was forgiven. But the reason the dress looked so beautiful was solely because of my lady's beauty. Natasha, of course, agreed and added that everything was exactly like that. In fact, there was no exaggeration here. Anna Theodore, a candidate for maid, recommended by Deborah. She was smart, so the mistress was sure that the girl would be obedient and would work to please her. So the lady thought this girl was good enough to keep. It was interesting to see how smart she was. The lady asked if this did not seem unfair, since both she and her daughter's maid were commoners. But unlike the maid, Natasha lives a completely different life, only because she has a different father, Natasha Baldwin. She was only half an aristocrat. Her birth mother had become a countess solely because of her beauty. Natasha inherited two things from her. The first was her dazzling appearance, and the second was her low birth. She knew her weakness better than anyone. Natasha always asked this question before choosing her personal maid. One could say that the answer to it was decisive. Either they would fire her or promote her to a personal maid, and the maid had to answer correctly. She said she didn't think so, and the lady asked why. The maid replied that a lady was a lady, and Anna was just a maid. It was the same answer as her previous maid. The mistress had hoped to hear something more original, but she only added that she was happy with what she had, and perhaps others would not understand her. But she is happy with the life she has. Feeding her niece to her fill and lying down in a warm bed with her is all she wants. She doesn't want to compare herself to other people, and thereby destroy the happiness she already has. She's not going to do something so stupid. The lady noticed that the maid seemed to say that her niece was 8 years old. Anna confirmed, saying that this was indeed the case. The girl turned 8 last month. After that, there was silence in the room. The lady said that from tomorrow, Anna can come to her room. When Anna returned home, she saw a light from her room. She immediately realized that her niece was not sleeping at such a late hour. She quickly walked into the room and approached Phoebe. The girl was very scared and surprised to see that her aunt had already arrived. It was her niece, and Anna came closer to her, reminding her that she had told her to go to bed early. The girl replied that she was just about to go. She repeated once again that her aunt had told her not to read in the dark, because it could ruin her eyesight. Phoebe explained that she had come across a very interesting book, and she wanted to surprise her aunt when she finished it, so that's why she tried. Anna was surprised and asked what the girl had studied before that time. She saw that this was not a primer for aristocrats. She asked if Phoebe could read it, and the girl said that the book had been thrown into the incinerator. She picked it up and studied it, deciding that it belonged to Angelica. Since she had thrown it away, it meant that she had not liked studying at all. But the text wasn't too difficult, and Phoebe didn't understand why Angelica found it difficult. She was surprised and asked her niece again if she wanted to say that it was easy for her. And the girl confirmed it again. Anna was shocked. This was a real problem. Of course, she knew Phoebe was smart, but if Angelica found out about it, it could be a disaster. Angelique would start screaming that a maid's niece couldn't claim to want to study like an aristocrat. After all, that was only available to those who were born into such circles. Anna was sure that was exactly what she would do. She would express all her anger and take it out on Phoebe, and the girl could get seriously hurt. So Anna approached her and asked her to promise something. Phoebe was surprised at first. Anna said she was proud of her because she was really smart. But wherever she was, especially next to Lady Angelica, it was absolutely impossible to say that she knew the language of aristocrats. The girl did not understand why, and Anna tried to explain that the lady might envy her. Phoebe replied that she would just hold back, even if it was hard for her. After all, she was smarter than that. Auntie said that it was precisely because she was smart that she had to keep it a secret. They sealed this promise with their little fingers. After this, the aunt suggested going to bed, but the girl said that she would like to read at night. The next morning, Deborah was delighted to see Anna. She had already congratulated her on her new position, Lady Natasha's personal maid. Anna noticed that Deborah was saying this for the 10th time and asked her to stop. But Deborah laughed and said that if Anna had only counted 10, she really wanted to say it 90 more times. Anna asked her to stop and not tease her. But Deborah was really happy. She was genuinely happy for her friend. Suddenly, Anna became frightened and sharply told Deborah to turn around. When she turned around, Angelica Baldwin, the eldest daughter of the Baldwin family, was behind her. Deborah immediately turned pale. She was frightened when she saw the lady in front of her. She tried to apologize, but Angelica silently slapped her in the face. According to her, all this is because Deborah serves a commoner. She doesn't even know how to behave properly. Deborah immediately began to apologize, admitting that she had acted imprudently. But in situations like these, no one can even open their mouth. This is what it means to be a servant to an aristocrat born into the wrong circles. They must act as if they do not exist, be a shadow that no one notices. Even if a close colleague gets reprimanded or criticized by the mistress, they can only watch silently. It is a kind of privilege to speak, to act, to object, and it belongs only to those who have power. Angelica looked at Anna and guessed that she was the new maid that Natasha had chosen. She noticed that she was quite nice in appearance. She immediately understood that Natasha had simply chosen her for her body, to use when needed. Angelica snorted, adding that this child was quite disgusting, and that the people Natasha serves are the same as she is. The lady interrupted Anna and asked why she called Natasha simply a lady. She asked if the maid thought that Natasha was some kind of half-baked aristocrat, the daughter of the very woman who had received the title in exchange for her body. Anna calmly replied that she was Natasha Baldwin's maid. Angelique asked her what she meant, and she replied that now that she was a personal maid, her ears were no longer hers alone. What she has just said, she hopes the lady will not mind if she conveys it to Lady Natasha. Angelica asked her again what exactly she had just said. The maid apologized if her words sounded rude, because she was now Lady Natasha's personal maid, and at the same time the maid of this mansion, so she decided to first find out Angelica's opinion, so as not to cause unnecessary concern. After this, Angelica turned to her personal maid Mary. She told Mary to bring the whip that her father had purchased the day before. Someone tried to tell her something, but Angelica cut them off abruptly, ordering them to bring a whip immediately. Mary said she would go get him right away. Angelica noted that Natasha must be heartbroken. The maid Natasha chose yesterday will disappear today. Relying only on her face, she managed to get what she has, just like Natasha herself. At that moment, Natasha appeared, and, according to the zodiac sign, it was she. She asked Angelica what she was saying about her. Then Natasha wished her good morning. She reminded them that she had given them one task, but they had been absent for a long time, and she became interested in the reason. Natasha also noted that she did not expect Angelica to beat her maids. Angelica replied that she wouldn't do it without a reason. She was just training them. In her opinion, the maids didn't even know the basics. These basics, as Angelica explained, begin with a slap. After these words, Natasha smiled. Angelica added that if Natasha did not want to be like her mother, she should train her servants in time. Natasha asked what she wanted to say about her mother. She noted that everyone knew that her mother was a very intelligent woman. Angelica smiled and told Natasha not to try to convince her that she was not proud of her mother. This is no good. Whatever the method, this woman passed on a lot to Natasha. Natasha confirmed that this is true. She is truly grateful to her mother, especially when she communicates with her sister. One day, one lady noticed that it was immediately obvious that Lady Natasha and Lady Angelica had different mothers. Angelica, of course, agreed. Her mother, unlike Natasha's mother, had a great history. Natasha noted that she had heard that she and her sister were different from head to toe, especially in mental abilities. Angelica became very angry at such words and began to demand an explanation. Natasha said that she is often asked how her sister managed not to know even the basic spelling of the language of the kingdom of Athila. In her place, Natasha, as she added, would have tried at least for the sake of shame. After all, saying that her sister is so stupid is already too serious. Angelica screamed that Natasha was behaving like a child and that it was impossible to deal with her. She decided that her sister would pay for it. Anna felt relieved. It was good that Natasha's people arrived on time. And so the morning incident ended. Deborah had to write a request for a short leave, as Lady Natasha had recommended. Therefore, Anna had to take on the duty of serving her mistress in the garden of the imperial palace. The main thing is that everything is okay with her friend. Another maid came up to Anna and said that she was absolutely amazing today. She noted that Anna stood up to Lady Angelica so confidently, even though she could have fired her. It was Anna's colleague, Annie. Anna only replied that she hadn't done anything special. She had simply told the truth. But Annie was absolutely delighted. She emphasized that it was still great and admitted that she was happy to see it. Anna was a little embarrassed. Of course, she could have been fired, but she simply had no other choice. When she came face to face with Lady Angelica, then she noticed that Natasha was watching the whole situation from the window. Even if she were to be flogged, it would show her loyalty to her mistress and help her keep her position as a personal maid. It would prove that she would always be on Lady Natasha's side. After all, her goal was to become Natasha's personal maid in order to travel with her after marriage. At least that would have made things more comfortable for Phoebe. Of course, she still wanted to avenge Deborah. Anna asked Annie if she had seen Prince Ivon before, and she said that today was the first time, and he was truly beautiful, like a god. She admitted that she was glad that she had been chosen instead of Deborah. Anna noted that he was indeed a handsome man, and added that he and Lady Natasha looked very cute. They really are perfect for each other. It would be good if His Highness were more sincere with the lady. Anna would probably want this too. Maybe then she could stay and serve in the imperial palace. Natasha thought that His Highness really liked her maid. The lady noticed that Ivon continued to glance at her. The gentleman said he just wanted to pay a compliment. After all, Natasha looked beautiful today when Anna dressed her up. Dressing up like that just for a walk in the garden, she could have nymphs. Natasha didn't want to listen to the man the whole empire envied anymore. Natasha was surprised that there were so many violets here, and thought that it would be better to plant more bright flowers. After all, this is a palace garden. Ivon noted that his mother didn't like them either, but she said that the violets reminded her of him, and that's why she treasured them. After all, purple is the color of the emperor. She picked a few flowers and took them in her hands. Natasha noted that perhaps this is why this flower is so durable. Before, she thought that Natasha was just an obedient child. But now, Anna knew that she could show her claws. This girl really turned out to be interesting. It's a pity that they didn't cross paths before. It's a shame that after the work is completed, it will have to be sent away. Ivon said that he didn't care whether they envied him or not. Envy is not his thing. And besides, looking at this maid, it seemed like they really had something to talk about. Natasha admitted that she wondered if he was sure he wanted to help, and Ivon confirmed this. He said it was important to him too, so he asked Natasha to bring him evidence. Then, as she had intended, he would destroy the Baldwin family. Anna tried to figure out the map. She couldn't figure out where she was, so I decided that she was just hopeless. Annie said that no matter how urgent her business was, she should not have left her luggage in the carriage. Thanks to Annie, Anna went to get her luggage, but got lost. There was no one to ask. She had to at least find the guard to find out the way. Then she noticed the maids from the imperial palace. Anna decided to come closer to them and ask for directions. She came up and apologized to them. She said she was a maid from the Baldwin family and had accidentally lost her way. At that moment, a gentleman came straight out of the room and asked again if she really was the Baldwin family's maid. Anna was frightened when she realized that it was His Highness in front of her. She remembered that this was the imperial palace and greeted His Highness. He said that they should finish with the greetings and move on to the question of what she was doing there. Anna tried to explain, but he interrupted and assumed that Natasha had sent her. The girl, embarrassed, replied that this was not so. She simply got lost on the way to the warehouse. She wanted to ask the maids for directions, but he looked at her and asked what she was looking at. The girl turned away and said that she was just embarrassed because he was standing in front of her without a shirt. The gentleman said he had had enough, and just in time, he had an assignment for her. She was surprised. And then the gentleman, smiling, explained that she needed to pick out clothes for him. He headed with her to the dressing room. She asked what occasion the clothes were for. The gentleman replied that it was for dinner today and asked what kind of clothes the mistress would like. Anna realized that he wanted to look good in front of Natasha's uncle. To him, she is just a maid, not a woman. No wonder he walks around in front of her with almost no clothes on. She said that Lady Natasha likes it when clothes look neat. Natasha prefers that everything on a man sits neatly and modestly, rather than fashionably and brightly. After that, he asked what kind of men she liked, and the maid replied that she also preferred neatly dressed ones. Then the gentleman asked what clothes he should wear. The maid, after thinking for a moment, replied that in his place, she would have chosen several options. When he got dressed, he asked if it didn't look too simple and uninteresting. But the maid thought the outfit was perfect. He asked her again if she really thought so, and the girl was absolutely delighted. Anna thought that Ivon just didn't like this outfit, that's all. Addressing him by his patronymic, she added that if the image seemed boring to him, it could easily be changed. Anna carefully took the brooch from him and suggested that he attach this one as well. The prince leaned forward slightly so that she could secure the decoration. He looked at Anna with his greedy, almost hungry eyes, and it made her head spin. She tried her best not to look up, only said that everything was ready, and the gentleman looked at himself in the mirror with pleasure. He was very grateful to her, and admitted that the work had indeed turned out well. Anna bowed, saying that it was a great honor for her. Then Ivon remarked that it would be good if the palace had a maid like her. So, he said, he was very sorry. When she went out, the girl ran into some man in the corridor. She didn't expect this, and didn't even know what to think. Everything was mixed up in her head. The man suddenly asked her if she liked men. No, it's not like that. Anna just turned around and ran, as if she didn't understand why or where. But it wasn't about him at all. She ran because her heart was bursting from the strong tension, and she knew exactly why. But suddenly, her feet caught on the edge of the carpet, and she started to fall. After falling, Anna didn't immediately understand why she felt so awkward. Ever since she left his room, this strange feeling had not left her. Anyone in her place would have felt nervous. After all, he is the most noble man in the entire empire, and she is just a maid who chose an outfit for such a great man. And suddenly, someone offered her a hand. She was sincerely grateful for the help. When she took hold of his palm, the man suddenly complained that it hurt. Anna was surprised, and he asked with concern if she was really crying. He decided that she was injured and asked if she was okay. Anna thought he might be from the kingdom of Ethila. Then she realized that he was talking about the wound, because he spoke with a noticeable accent. She hastened to assure him that everything was fine, and thanked him for his concern. The man insisted that he had to cure her, but Anna refused, explaining that it was nothing serious, just trifles. She had already wasted too much time, and Lady Natasha was most likely waiting for her. The guy muttered something about his room, and Anna decided that he wanted to treat her there. She thanked him politely, but said that she really had to go. The lady was waiting, and again she expressed gratitude for his help, wishing him a safe return. But he grabbed her sleeve again and started talking about his room again. Anna turned around and said clearly that she would not go there. It may be customary in Ethiel to go into a room with a man you've just met, but in the Empire, it's considered unacceptable. The guy looked confused, claiming that he didn't know about it because it was just his room. He was excited, but Anna calmly stated that since he didn't know, he should find out. This is the Cadogan Empire, and if he came here, he is obliged to respect its culture. The man repeated that he didn't know, and Anna, turning away, said that it was his business and that she needed to go. She thought that this man's behavior was simply terrible. Everything about him seemed repulsive and unpleasant to her. She believed that beauty was meaningless without modesty. After all, there had to be at least a drop of dignity. The man continued to insist that he knew nothing. He said that the room was not his, and that he himself did not understand where he was. Anna finally found that very book about Ariadne and Manish. She searched for a long time, but finally came across it in the far row. A memory came to mind of her asking her niece if she had a book in the language of the nobility lying around. It was the same book that Phoebe had read before, and there was nothing wrong with that. Anna just wanted to know what her relative was reading. The book said that God felt unbearably lonely and created a being so that at least someone would be near him. This was Manish. God bestowed his power upon Manish, blessing him with it and making him almost equal to himself. Entire nations were created for Manish, so that he would not feel alone. But Manish, relying on the power of God and his mercy, became more and more arrogant, not noticing how he was losing himself. One of the gifts bestowed upon Manish by God was disappearance, a terrible and powerful blessing. His words could destroy and erase anything he wished. Anything or being would disappear forever. Manish enjoyed this gift, using it with special pleasure, as if he were playing with the world as with a toy. Manish, in his selfish desire, destroyed many lives, and with each passing year, his actions became more destructive. When the god looked back on his fate, he realized that this being who loved himself so much was in fact doomed. His first human being was known to everyone, loved by everyone, but Manish could not love anyone. His loneliness was his punishment, and it was his fault. He knew that he himself was the cause of his emptiness. It was only when Ariadne gave him her love that Manish felt that it was a blessing sent to him from above. In her eyes, he saw the light that he so needed. But the blessing that Manish thought was a gift turned into a real curse for him. Sharp pain penetrated his body When his feelings became too strong, and everything seemed unbearable, every word, every sound, even his own breathing brought him unbearable pain. His body seemed to be breaking from these sharp sensations, which became more and more intense. Ariadne became his salvation. Every time he touched her, his body calmed down and he could breathe freely again, as if her presence eased his suffering. She was his only goddess, his savior, and only next to her could he feel any relief from the pain that tormented him. He confessed that he wanted her to stay with him forever. Everyone who saw them understood that this was the last blessing that God had given him, love that could heal his soul. This story was not only about eternal love, but also about tragedy, too cruel for children to talk about. It was not just a fairy tale, but a reality full of pain and fear. Ariadne didn't believe that Manish would ever appear in her life again, especially not in the next 70 years. But suddenly she heard screams as the girl asked her brother if he understood how much this girl had insulted him. Anna heard a familiar voice. It was Angelica. Her brother always asked his sister to be quiet, because someone from the house could hear their conversations and interfere. Angelica wasn't worried. She said loudly that her words weren't threatening, and if anyone wanted to listen, let them listen. She didn't say anything like that. Lady Angelica and young Master Percival discussed her behavior. Angelica believed that she had long been misunderstood and might be thought to be eavesdropping. Angelica answered her brother that her words had raised questions more than once, and that the young man with whom she was now arguing simply did not understand his situation. Her brother advised her to drop the subject, because very soon her problems would become unimportant. She would soon leave home anyway. His words sounded like a death sentence. Angelica, not hiding her displeasure, asked where she was going and who would throw her out. Her brother confirmed that yes, she would indeed be thrown out, and that day was not far off. It was Phoebe's birthday, and the atmosphere was full of celebration. All attention was focused on the girl who was enjoying her congratulations. The guests came and congratulated Phoebe on her special day. Everyone who was present was happy for the girl with all their hearts, wishing her happiness and good luck in the future. Since it was her day, Phoebe was allowed to have 2 pieces of cake. Everything was arranged according to her wishes, and she happily enjoyed the taste of the holiday. Deborah, noticing the expression on her friend's face, asked her what that sad expression was, as if she wanted to upset Phoebe. Anna looked a little lost and thoughtful. Anna apologized and explained that her thoughts were far away. She was thinking about something of her own that had nothing to do with the current moment, and it upset her a little. Deborah thought that Anna was simply tired of work, because the workload on her lately had been great. Perhaps this was the reason for her thoughtfulness and fatigue. The woman suggested that Anna stay with her for a while, as there were many empty rooms in the house. This could be a good respite for her friend and would allow her to rest. Anna's husband said that his wife was absolutely right, and that the doors of their home would always be open to her as a loved one who could always count on them. Anna replied that as soon as Phoebe grew a little older, she would immediately move in with them to be close and support her friend as soon as possible. She needed a little more money to rent a room at a hotel, and she hoped that they could help with this because she did not want to remain in debt. If they found out about all the circumstances, they would definitely provide her with the most comfortable living conditions, which gave her a certain amount of hope. However, she was not ready to use their kindness to her advantage, despite her sincere gratitude, which created a slight tension in their relationship. She did not want to feel like a burden to kind people like them, and so she continued to insist on her independence, although her heart was full of gratitude. Because of this, the guy approached Phoebe, noticing that he had bought her a gift and wanted her to appreciate his gesture, despite his shyness in such matters. He asked Phoebe if she liked dolls, trying to figure out what kind of gift would be most enjoyable and appropriate to please her. The girl asked again, looking at him in surprise, noticing that he had prepared a rabbit doll for her, which caused her to smile happily and become slightly excited. She happily thanked Matteo, and Anna wondered how she could regularly receive such nice gifts and always feel cared for. Matteo replied that it was not that difficult at all, since Phoebe was also his niece, and she should accept such signs of attention with a clear conscience and without doubts. Deborah noticed how much Matteo was in love with Anna, and decided to tease him a little when she saw how he got flustered and blushed at any mention of it. She walked up to her brother and asked him with playful interest what kind of box it was, trying to get him angry and enjoy his embarrassment. He was confused and blushed deeply, not knowing what to say, because his emotions were obvious and he felt uncomfortable under her intense gaze. He tried to find the words, but then his sister said with a smile that this was probably also a gift for his niece, teasing him even more and causing him to laugh. The guy was a little surprised when he saw that everyone accepted the situation so easily. He hadn't expected such a turn of events, but, in principle, it didn't bother him too much. Deborah smiled and said that it was incredibly sweet, and then suggested that they give the gift to the little girl as soon as possible so that she could enjoy this moment of happiness. He tried to stop them, but it was too late. The gift was given to the girl, and it looked like there was no other way. The baby looked like a real princess, and everyone around could not contain their delight. Her happiness was obvious, and this pleased everyone present. The girl approached Uncle Mateo and expressed her gratitude. She was genuinely touched and felt that his gift was truly important. Mateo was surprised and perhaps even a little confused. His mood worsened slightly because he wanted to give this gift not to the little girl, but to Anna. The girl came up to Mateo and told him that she really liked him. She genuinely felt a connection with him, and her words were full of tenderness and admiration. Mateo smiled back and said that he liked her very much too. He noticed that the girl was really beautiful, and her kindness could not help but touch him. As they drove back home, Deborah smiled as she noticed how fun the day had been. The atmosphere was light, and everyone was enjoying the time they had spent. She added that she liked everything too, and said that Anna should come more often. After all, in her opinion, she worries too much and winds herself up. Phoebe was dozing on Anna's shoulders, as if in her own little fairy tale. Suddenly, the girl woke up, and without opening her eyes, asked to be allowed to sleep a little longer. After that, Phoebe, in a quiet voice, asked if she could whisper something to Anna. Her words were soft like a whisper, and Anna leaned towards her curiously. Anna watched with interest the girl who was so sincere, and suddenly she became interested in the question the girl was going to ask. The girl, a little embarrassed, asked if Anna realized that all the words spoken in her aunt's house actually had no meaning and were just empty talk. She admitted that she liked her aunt more than anything in the world and happily supported her in the fact that her affection for Phoebe was unique and sincere. Anna added with a smile that she also loved Phoebe very much, considering her the most important person in her life, and this was obvious in her tone and look. The girl, with shining eyes, admitted that she loved Anna and would now be happy to communicate with her in the language of the aristocracy, striving to be at her best. The book that Phoebe was reading so enthusiastically was written in the language of the aristocracy, and perhaps it was the same book that Angelica threw away, not wanting to learn. Anna could not fully understand what the Baldwins were really planning, and this question tormented her more and more, because a strange atmosphere of intrigue and omissions hung in the house. Remembering the conversation she had heard between her brother and Angelica, she caught strange hints that Natasha would soon be kicked out, and this was connected with her upcoming plans. Angelica was sure that Benjamin Owen, the second son, was going to marry some common girl, but this seemed unlikely in the eyes of many aristocrats. However, Angelica's brother said that it was not Benjamin Owen who would marry, but she herself would marry his father, which caused everyone's surprise and bewilderment. Lady Natasha had no idea that her life could change dramatically, and no one told her about it directly, which only increased her ignorance. It was necessary to find a way to inform Natasha about what was happening. Otherwise, everything could end very badly for her, and her future could be in jeopardy. Annie, noticing how worried Anna was, quietly approached and with a worried look said that, despite all her thoughts, this time everything that was happening was not imaginary, but real. Anna asked in surprise what exactly they were talking about. Annie, in turn, simply meant His Highness, since there had never been a case when the prince personally visited the mansion. Everything was happening too suddenly, and, frankly speaking, Anna herself had not yet realized it. Everything was mixed up in her head, because she had not even suspected such a thing. Anna didn't notice, although it was obvious to everyone, that he was in love. All the signs were there, but for some reason she couldn't understand it. However, if he really liked her, then it would be logical for him to show up to dinner in his formal attire, and not in the one he showed up in. Anna found it strange that he came to dinner in completely different clothes. It made her wonder why he chose such an outfit for such an important event. Anna expressed doubts, saying that she would not be so sure of it. After all, it was His Highness, and she could not claim that he was in love. Annie, of course, agreed with Anna, but then she said that she was going to go to the gardener. It was time to change the central composition in the garden. The work did not wait. Anna decided to finish the work in the living room so that she could help the other maids. Every detail had to be taken into account, especially if something had to be redone. After that, she was going to help the lady with her hair. Today, her plan was to help her choose earrings, especially the beautiful pearl ones that matched perfectly. On the way, Anna met Lady Angelica, who looked rather tense and reserved. She did not expect to meet her now. Anna had not planned to cross paths with Lady Angelique today, especially since Madame was clearly not in the mood. All this created awkwardness in their meeting. After all, today His Highness was supposed to come personally to see the young lady, and the entire atmosphere in the house was tuned precisely to this event. She just had to carefully pass by. But when Anna was already walking, Lady Angelica unexpectedly tripped her. It was a complete surprise. Anna almost fell, but her balance was lost. The girl felt her body begin to fall rapidly, but she managed to hold on. She collapsed along with the spilled water, and everything around became wet. Angelica asked with a slight smile what to do now in such a situation. The water had spilled completely, and she was not sure whether she would be able to finish the cleaning before His Majesty arrived. Time was running out, and there was a lot of work to do. Then, Angelica added that Anna was a connected maid, and she didn't have to do such dirty work. It wasn't her job. After these words, she stepped on the girl's hand and added that those who could not cope would work overtime. Other innocent maids worked for her. Then she wondered why Anna was silent. Maybe she had swallowed her tongue or had already lost respect. This did not leave her indifferent. Or perhaps Anna had finally realized what was happening and how, and now she had to accept her role in it. It was becoming increasingly obvious. Anna looked up, apologized, and at that moment, Angelica, feeling victorious, casually climbed into her leg, feeling more and more confident. It was boring. It was all so mundane that it was hard to imagine anyone paying attention. Just another flash of brilliance, after all. Only yesterday she had washed her clothes, and now she had no time for such trifles. Everything was absorbed by more important matters that required a solution. First, she needed to change into clean clothes, and at the same time, take care of her hand, which now hurt a lot from being stepped on. It would be okay, she could still use it. It was unpleasant, but not catastrophic, so she could move on. Angelica didn't hit her or mock her for long. She simply stepped on her hand, and that was enough to emphasize her superiority. Now they had to hurry. Time was running out, and although Anna felt pain, she knew that time was not standing still. She was fine, if a little shaken by the situation. It didn't matter, because these things happened, and she had to continue to do her job. The vase was real porcelain, and now it lay broken on the floor. It was a pity, but not a catastrophe, because she understood perfectly well the consequences of such an incident. A rare piece based on the nocturnal motifs of the Attila Desert has become a subject of admiration among collectors. Its unusual execution has attracted the attention of art lovers. It is said that only about 200 examples of such ceramic works have survived in the entire empire. Of course, for the imperial family, this is nothing, but for ordinary people, it is a rarity. Jack Baldwin, Earl of Baldwin, described this work of art to the prince. The prince immediately noted that the work was masterfully executed and appreciated the artist's skill. After this, the prince turned to the count, and Jack began to suspect that something was wrong. His intuition told him that there was something more behind this object. The prince said that he knew very well how many similar items were kept in the Baldwin estate. Apparently, he was aware of all the count's collections, which only increased suspicions. Ivon continued, specifying how exactly this object ended up in this living room. He did not hide his curiosity and interest in the works of art that surrounded them. He explained that they had to leave the room quickly before the situation got out of hand. His words left no room for doubt. Things were not as they seemed at first glance. The Count confidently stated that it was a misunderstanding and immediately asked for forgiveness. He was ready to retreat in order to avoid further questions and misunderstandings in the conversation. A few seconds later, they had already left the room, and Natasha was surprised to notice that she had not expected the prince to actually do that. His behavior seemed decisive and confident. Ivon thoughtfully asked if he had ever let her down. He knew that Natasha's words were always sincere, but he wanted to make sure that she did not doubt his honesty. She replied that he shouldn't worry, because she always believed in his words. She knew that he kept his word and would never leave her in difficult times. Natasha smiled and said that he shouldn't lie, because she always kept her word too. They were both people of honor, and this gave them confidence that they could rely on each other. She came closer to him, and they embraced. Their gesture was sincere, and in that embrace, one could feel the support and trust they always gave each other. Behind her, in her hands, was a scroll that she held as if it were an important object. It was something she had decided to hand over, perhaps as a sign of trust or a secret they shared. The prince was sure that he had finally found the proof. This was exactly what he had been looking for so long, and what confirmed his suspicions. The girl let him look at the materials he had found, and she confirmed his thoughts. Everything was correct, as he had expected. As they sat next to each other, the gentleman noted that the situation looked strange. It did not fit into his usual expectations of such events. The lady asked him what exactly he meant. The prince explained that, as far as he knew, hallucinogenic drugs were smuggled out of Itila, and Marquis Owen continued on his way. He immediately realized that this was most likely evidence of betrayal by the Marquis of Owen, not the Baldwin. But the lady reminded him that a deal had recently been made between these families. The Baldwin family has signed an exclusive contract with a trading company run by the Marquis of Owen. This agreement could have major consequences. Once the contract comes into effect, it will be strong evidence of involvement in smuggling. Everything will start to fall into place. The prince remarked that if he were in the Marquis's place, he would have chosen a much more advantageous option than the one proposed by the Baldwins. The lady agreed that in the end it didn't matter. Both families would be destroyed no matter how it ended. She understood that plans could change at any moment, so the girl had to check everything again so as not to miss a single detail. Natasha assured her that she would definitely check everything. Now there was no reason to worry. Everything was going according to plan. The girl felt that when this was over, her long-time wish would finally come true. This was the moment she had been hoping for so long. When it was all over, a lot would change, and it would be a new beginning for everyone. All that was left was to wait for the ending. The prince noticed that the laundresses were extremely busy. Everything around them was in motion, and every step required attention and speed. Natasha looked at him in surprise and noted that it seemed too early to change the beds. Everything had to happen according to a certain schedule. The prince noticed that he was there and thought it would be a good idea to live up to all the expectations that were placed on maids in such a position. He wanted everything to go perfectly. He noticed how pathetic it all looked, especially considering that the maids were busy cleaning and tidying up, their attention completely absorbed by this process. It was not the most convenient moment. At this time, she could not understand what exactly she should do in such a situation. Everything was new and uncertain for her. Feelings of confusion took over her mind. She didn't know whether she should start drying the lady or start by filling the tub with water. The choice wasn't that obvious, and it was confusing. She was worried because it was her first experience working in such circumstances, and she was afraid of making a mistake. She was nervous because she didn't want to disappoint. Suddenly, the bell rang, and she realized that she had to get the bathroom ready first. That was the first thing she had to do, and she focused on that task. She apologized, but in response, she heard the prince say that it seemed that she had been chosen to carry out these duties. This surprised her a little, but she tried not to show it. The prince looked at her with his bright blue eyes. His gaze was so piercing that she could not help but feel its influence. It was like something invisible, but tangible. The prince greeted her, calling her Natasha's maid. These words were unexpected for her, but she tried to remain calm and politely respond to what was happening. She didn't realize at all that His Highness was still here. She expected him to leave, because she always heard that he left the place before the exclusive maid arrived. She remembered that he usually didn't stay long in these places, leaving before his needs could be met by other staff. It was strange and new to her. She replied that she also greeted him, and in response, the prince said that she should pour water, as he wanted to wash his hands. The task was clear, and she set about it. Anna realized that she would have to serve the prince first, and then move on to other tasks. It became obvious, and she could not retreat from it. Ivon inquired about the state of the room, but the maid did not quite understand what exactly he meant. The question was a mystery to her, and she did not know how to answer. The gentleman said that in the imperial ration, she found the necessary piece and did not get lost, to which the girl confirmed his words, noting that Adam kindly prompted her. The gentleman expressed his joy at this, his voice sounding slightly relieved that the situation had been resolved without any unnecessary problems, after which he turned to the girl with the intention of saying something. His gaze became more focused and a little thoughtful. He noted that the exclusive maid had to do her duties and maintain order, and that this was part of her job. She felt very embarrassed when he suddenly picked up her bandage. His actions made her feel awkward. She immediately turned away, her cheeks flushed, and asked for forgiveness for her behavior, trying to avoid his gaze. The gentleman replied that there was no need to apologize and asked her to take care of Natasha, leaving her without further ado. The maid bowed in respect and firmly promised to fulfill the request, her face focused on the importance of the task. She was still extremely embarrassed, ashamed that he had noticed that she was not quite tidy, although she did not want it to become a topic of conversation. When she was helping the ladies prepare, she felt that Natasha didn't like the earrings she was wearing, as they seemed a little distant. But Natasha confidently said that this was not the case, and explained that she was simply lost in thoughts that had nothing to do with jewelry. The girl couldn't help but laugh, because she was still wondering why she was so busy pouring milk tea. It seemed completely ridiculous. The gentleman noticed that they were both wet, and noted that their clothes were very dirty. He thought it would be strange not to notice, but in his eyes it was not particularly important. They certainly weren't going to taste them, so despite the oddity, they were confident that no one would notice anything suspicious. Anna felt uneasy, and it was clearly conveyed in her behavior. Fear of the situation made her behave exactly as she could. This attitude was unpleasant, and sometimes even offensive. But despite this, she believed that such behavior was at least no worse than the previous ignoring. Since they were in no hurry to find out the real evidence, Anna decided to turn to the lady and tell her something important that required attention. The lady turned to her and said that she was ready to listen. It was her offer, and she expected Anna to explain what exactly was bothering her. Anna said that while visiting the library at the party, she accidentally overheard a conversation between a young gentleman and a madame, and it really touched her. She knew perfectly well that it was important for the lady, but she couldn't just leave, knowing that what she heard had a direct bearing on her future. Natasha was extremely surprised, but she waited for Anna to continue telling, since this was clearly an important discovery that she needed to hear. Anna carefully began to tell that Marquis Arnold Owen wanted to marry her, and this could not help but plunge Natasha into bewilderment and anxiety. She heard that the Marquise's family was in the jewelry business, and Madame might be seeking this alliance solely to strengthen her position in the business. Natasha was not only shocked by the proposal, but also worried, because she heard that they really wanted to marry her off, and it was not only connected with a trade deal. She remembered Ivan's words again, when he said that he would have chosen options much better than the Baldwins if he had been in the Marquis's place, but this was only the result of her sale. The maid noted that she thought it was a good job on her part, expressing gratitude for the work done despite the difficult situation. The girl replied that she was simply doing her duty, and then the lady asked with interest what the maid would do if she were in her place, only in a different position. Natasha was surprised and replied that if she were a lady, she would enter into an alliance with the second son of the Marquis of Owen, explaining her choice as a reasonable step in light of the current circumstances. The lady was surprised and asked the maid again why she had chosen this particular option, inquiring about her motives and the reason why she had made her decision. The maid explained that, as far as she knew, his name was Benjamin, to which the mistress immediately asked where she had learned this information and what was behind her words. Anna replied that when she heard about the wedding, Madame asked if Natasha would marry Benjamin, but Natasha immediately assured that this was not the case, refuting the rumors. Natasha decided to clarify how Anna learned about the letter that the young gentleman had secretly given her, and asked with surprise who was the source of this information and how it came to her. When Anna noticed the surprise on the maid's face, she immediately realized that Natasha thought she was unaware. However, the maid confirmed that this was indeed the case. Natasha thought it was strange. Anna didn't know about it. She had simply assumed that such a union wouldn't interest Ivon, but apparently she had been mistaken in her expectations. When she heard the Marquise's name, the maid noted that it was Benjamin, not the Marquise's second son. She said this, emphasizing his name. Natasha noticed that young Mr. Benjamin was clearly interested in Anna. She assumed that he was in love with her, and this could influence the future development of events. The maid thought it would be logical to declare a possible official relationship between them, which would give them greater confidence and support in their intentions. In that case, the Marquise would not have been able to marry a girl who would already have been recognized as his son's mistress, which would have given Anne a certain protection and status. Anna, having listened to the maid's opinion, said that it was only her point of view. She understood that the decision should remain hers and depend on her personal choice. In the end, everything depends on the lady's wishes, Natasha agreed, thinking about what step would be the most successful and correct in the current situation for Anna. She admitted that Benjamin was a good choice, and in terms of the agreement with His Highness, everything was on point. But, in the end, she could change her mind, and that had to be taken into account too. As expected, Natasha came to the conclusion that the maid should not be let go under any circumstances. After all, her role in these events is still important, and she will be on the lady's side until the end. Natasha felt that her presence here was unnecessary and thought that she would be much more useful elsewhere. But for now, she could only wait patiently. Natasha stood up, deciding they needed to go. Halfway to the door, a memory suddenly struck her, and she added belatedly that she had forgotten something else. Turning to Anna, Natasha noted that she must not forget something important. This month she was due to receive her well-deserved salary, and she could hardly wait for it. Anna received Natasha's words with pleasure. Her reaction was sincere. She never expected that she would receive her well-deserved reward for her work so soon. The thought flashed through her mind that with this news she might be able to get into a room much sooner than she thought. She was already making plans. Today, Ivon was in a determined mood and did not want to listen to excuses about the broken watch. He was too busy with other important matters to take it seriously. Natasha was a little surprised when he didn't want to believe her words. However, she was grateful for the opportunity to share the whole truth with her. It was a relief. Deborah, turning to her friend, noted with a smile that she was not worried about the money issue. In her eyes there was only one concern: Lady Natasha and her well-being. She was happy that they would be able to spend time together, without any interruptions. All she could do was enjoy the moment, because they could finally talk calmly. Anna, with a touch of irony, noted that the two would have a wonderful time. There was a hint of envy in her words, but she was genuinely happy for them. Natasha, without wasting time, turned to Anna, reminding her that now she needed to hurry. At that moment, the maid approached her, ready to fulfill her duties. Anna was extremely surprised when the lady ordered her to sit in the imperial carriage. It was unexpected, but she decided not to ask unnecessary questions and obeyed. Anna asked Natasha what she was talking about. In response, the lady explained that she simply wanted to go with her. It was her wish, and she did not object in any way. In order to get closer to Benjamin Owen, it was important to prove that the relationship with Ivon Orpheus Cadogan was not serious. This is important for further steps. The task was complicated, but to confirm these words, it was necessary to show that they were not alone, that they did not have close and secret meetings, not so personal. It was for this reason that the maid agreed to sit next to the lady without hesitation, because it was the only way to show that everything between them was not at all serious. The imperial carriage looked so luxurious that even a maid, she thought, could not find herself in such a majestic place. This made her stand out from the ordinary servants. Ivon noticed that they had met the maid Natasha again. She was wearing a different outfit, and this could not help but attract his attention, making him think about what was happening. Natasha bowed to His Highness the Second Prince, as was proper etiquette. There was respect in her gesture, although she did not share any special feelings for Ivon. His status remained important. The gentleman said that they could now set out. He was ready for the journey ahead, and all the necessary preparations had been completed. There was no obstacle to the next step. This was the first time Ivon saw the maid Natasha not in her usual maid uniform. He paid attention to her style and appearance, trying to understand her choice. He assumed that it was Natasha who chose this outfit, and she confirmed his guess, saying that it was indeed her choice. Her answer sounded confident that the decision was hers. Ivon had to talk to the lady, and so she couldn't understand why he was asking her such things. Her place was on the side, and conversations with her should be limited. Natasha, of course, was not the kind of person who would be offended by a conversation with her lover. However, of course, there was a moment when her patience could be tested. The prince asked if Natasha would like to work at the palace. She was interested, and then turned to Anna and asked if she had heard of His Highness. Her curiosity was obvious. Anna replied that this was indeed the case, and thanked the prince for his offer. She said that she wanted to finish her business in the city, and asked Natasha to excuse her for the delay. Anna knew she had to act accordingly. However, Natasha assured her that working at the palace was a great opportunity that she shouldn't miss. Natasha believed that the prince's offer was much more profitable than serving as a maid for the Baldwins. She was sure that such a chance should be accepted without hesitation. Ivon couldn't understand why Natasha was so scared by this proposal. He didn't see any reason to worry and didn't understand what exactly made her doubt. He thought that if anyone heard about their conversation, they would think that he was threatening Natasha with his position. But in fact, he did not want to scare anyone and did not do anything threatening. Natasha knew that her behavior might seem strange. She realized that her reputation with others could be perceived as a threat. But in reality, she was only expressing her point of view. Even if someone denied it, to them it would still be seen as mere entertainment, nothing more. In their eyes, she was just a servant, and they did not take her seriously. Such moments required special caution from a person. It was better to keep one's mouth shut, not to attract attention to oneself. Otherwise, one could make a mistake by saying too much. Natasha noticed that this was not just a simple ceremony. This event meant the establishment of diplomatic relations, and the presence of the Ethiel royal family was inevitable. The fourth prince would most likely be coming too, and Ivon confirmed this, although he couldn't remember his name exactly. He couldn't remember everyone he had ever met. Ivon thought that, like the entire Ethiel family, the prince's name would end in Zelo. Such features were known among this family and did not surprise anyone at such meetings. Natasha, noticing his forgetfulness, thought that it would be useful for His Highness to remember the names of princes and other high-profile personalities with whom he had to establish relations. However, Ivon smiled and confidently said that in any case, all duties in this situation would be performed by his brother. His role was rather symbolic, and he did not know what to do next. And indeed, no matter how strange it was, he always forgot people, their names, their faces. It was unusual, but Ivon did not attach any importance to it, preferring to avoid details. Natasha came to the conclusion that Ivon probably simply couldn't remember men's names, and apparently he couldn't remember women's names either. He didn't even know the names of his maids, who had worked for him for a long time. She agreed with this because it was clear how difficult it was to remember everyone's names, especially when you meet new faces every day and don't always have time to socialize. Anna continued to sit, not saying a word, lost in her thoughts and trying to understand what was happening around her, not paying attention to those around her. She could not say anything, she just remained silent. Suddenly, Natasha, turning to the Highness, proposed to make a bet. She proposed a bet on her name and the name of her maid, which surprised everyone in the room. Anna was frightened when she heard this proposal. She could not understand what Natasha meant, and listened tensely as Natasha said that he would soon forget her name. The prince, interested in what was going on, asked what the stake of this bet would be, which only increased the tension in the room. Everyone was watching the situation closely. Natasha replied with a smile that if she lost, she would forget about the bet. However, she did not accept the name Anastasia, and this was her condition, which gave the dispute an unusual shade. The gentleman, to everyone's surprise, agreed to the bet, deciding to test his memory and see how this unusual contest would go. The room fell silent. Everyone awaited the outcome. After this, the prince finally decided to ask what the maid's name was, in order to get answers to his questions. He tried to understand who was hiding behind this proposal. Anna, a little nervously, introduced herself with her full name, not knowing how the prince would perceive her, and all her thoughts were focused on this moment, where her name became an important part of the situation. The prince said with slight surprise that this name was indeed a good one, and even admitted a little that it was easy for him to remember such names. This eased the tension a little. He added that it had been so difficult to get to know this maid, that now he was finally able to establish at least some contact. This was not an easy step for him. When she returned home, she felt pain. The shoes she had chosen for the occasion had caused a wound on her foot. It was not a pleasant sensation, and she felt discomfort. Anna had deliberately bought new shoes that matched her outfit perfectly, hoping that they would be comfortable, but unfortunately, the wound became an unpleasant consequence of her choice. She felt the pain of her sore feet again, but at least she was grateful that it was only a small wound that, fortunately, did not cause any serious harm. Ivon's words came into her mind. He had once said that her name was easy to remember, and that simple phrase had left a mark on her memory, making her feel slightly awkward. Confusion washed over her as she thought about his words again. He had said that her name was easy, and that had left her with mixed feelings. She couldn't understand why it was so important. It was normal for the master, as she had come to call him in her thoughts, to forget the names of the maids, since in their world it didn't matter. He didn't think it was necessary to remember such trifles, but on the other hand, a maid has no right to forget her master's name, because she must always remember her role. It was not just etiquette, but a part of their relationship that bothered her. It's a strange double standard. In a place where everyone knows their roles and everyone has a certain position, names aren't that important, but they're still remembered to keep the balance. Her leg bandage was slightly visible through the fabric of her skirt, but she couldn't afford to be too careful about it. It was unavoidable, and she would just have to live with it. After all, it made sense. After all, no one would be interested in the hem of a maid and what was hidden underneath. None of that should bother anyone, especially not here. She continued to search for the banquet hall, which seemed to stretch on forever. The whole journey was not as short as she had hoped, and she was becoming increasingly impatient. And then, in the distance, she noticed a familiar figure. It was a man she had once crossed paths with, and now she felt everything inside her tense up from the unexpected meeting. It was the parrot she had spoken to recently. He had said something about his room, but she could hardly remember the details of their meeting, as she was too busy with other thoughts. She couldn't believe her eyes, but the same man was standing in front of her. It would have been better to just walk past, not paying attention to him, but some strange instinct wouldn't let her do it. He suddenly turned to her, and despite her desire to pass by, she realized she couldn't avoid the interaction. She would have to respond, and that hadn't been her plan. He intended to keep following her if she acted this way, and it was important to him that she greeted him. It was an important moment for him. Anna, noticing his glance, greeted him, and only after that, he began to head in her direction. He was approaching, but still holding back, not hurrying. Anna felt uneasy as she saw him approaching. She didn't know how to act at this moment, and her feelings were contradictory. She couldn't understand what he needed. She asked him to stop, because he was getting too close. She felt like she needed to step back to keep her distance and calm down. His approach was scaring her. She asked him to wait a bit, starting to back away because he kept coming too fast. She felt her space being violated. Suddenly, her legs gave way and she slipped, starting to fall. It all seemed to be happening too fast, and her fear grew. This could end very badly. But luckily, he managed to grab her hand, preventing her from falling. His reaction was instantaneous, and thanks to him, she avoided falling. Her heart was beating fast with excitement. He warned her to be careful, so as not to get into an unpleasant situation. Anna thanked him, her breathing still rapid from the shock and gratitude she had experienced. Anna realized how close she had come to an unpleasant outcome. If she had fallen, the consequences could have been terrible, and even a concussion would not have been the worst thing. Anna noticed that he often came to her aid and felt a desire to know how she could repay him for his attention and support. Her interest in him only grew. He said something, touching her hand, but his words were not quite clear. It seemed that he did not know her language, and this confused her. She could not understand what he meant. The girl was completely confused. She did not understand why he spoke in this way, and it left her at a loss. His words made her think. After that, she remembered that yesterday she had hurt her hand when Mrs. Angelica had stepped on it, and the mark from that blow was still visible on her skin. She felt pain, but she kept herself under control. This mark remained from the moment when Madame caught her, and the guy, seeing the wound, immediately asked for forgiveness. He was worried, sincerely regretted what happened, but she did not feel anger. Anna assumed that the guy wanted to say that he accidentally stepped on her hand and that he did not do it on purpose. He looked embarrassed, and the girl could not understand what he was trying to express. She tried to explain to him that everything was okay and that he shouldn't worry. She understood that he was trying to help, and she didn't feel offended, despite the pain she felt from what happened. The guy started saying something about the escort, but she couldn't figure out what exactly he was trying to say. His words sounded a little confusing, and she couldn't understand the gist of his phrase. The girl explained to him that she was not an escort, but simply a maid. He looked very agitated, and looking at his expression, Anna could not understand what exactly was happening to him. Anna thought he was trying to say that he was an escort, but she had a hard time being sure what this guy meant. His behavior was unusual and confusing. After some thought, Anna decided that perhaps he really was accompanying the delegation from Itana, as she had thought. She felt the conversation beginning to clear up, but she still remained unsure. She was pleased to meet him and introduced herself. Anna Theodore, a servant to the lady of the Baldwin family. As she greeted him, she tried to appear confident despite all the uncertainties that had surrounded this conversation. The man seemed to introduce himself as Arcangelo von Ithila, pronouncing it with such confidence that there was no doubt as to the truth of his words. Anna was surprised to hear the name Ithila. It was unusual and somewhat intriguing, since she believed that only members of royal or imperial families could bear such names. She wondered why this particular name had caught her attention so much. After all, she had always thought that such names could only be used by noble and high-ranking families. The girl remembered the words of her niece, who once explained that in aristocratic language, the word order differs from the traditional one, which could be connected with this incident. Phoebe had said that von meant of in the Ithila language, and Anna now realized that this man was introducing himself as someone who came from Ithila itself. She was grateful that he had told her his last name so openly, and replied with a smile that he could simply address her as Anna, without any titles or complications. The man remained silent, and Anna, feeling unsure, began to think that perhaps she was in too much of a hurry and speaking too quickly, not giving him time to react. Then she decided to say her name again slowly, hoping that it would help him remember it easier. But he still called her Ano, which confused the girl a little. She gently corrected him again, saying that her name was indeed Anna. At that moment, the girl noticed a slight embarrassment appear on the man's face. A few minutes later, he was finally able to pronounce her name correctly, and Anna, smiling, told him that he had finally succeeded, praising him for it. A lot of time passed during this casual conversation, and Anna did not even notice how quickly the minutes flew by, absorbed in their communication and internal thoughts. It was already late, and Anna realized that it was time for her to join everyone in the banquet hall, so as not to be late and not leave her companions waiting. Anna told the boy that she had some business to finish, and after thanking Mr. Arcangelo, she was about to leave. It was clear that she was in a hurry, and her gratitude sounded sincere. But suddenly, he grabbed her sleeve again, asking her to stop. Anna didn't immediately understand what was happening. Her gaze darted to him, trying to understand what caused his reaction. He repeated his words, again saying something about an escort. It was unclear to her, but apparently it was an important explanation that she could not immediately understand or accept. Anna asked if he was an escort, and noted that this possibly meant he was an envoy from the kingdom of Ithila, which in itself was a significant discovery. He confirmed her assumption, and the girl, after thinking for a moment, replied that now everything was clear. This man really did look different, and this confirmed his status. His clothes were clearly different from those worn by Mr. Arcangelo, and Anna thought that perhaps the prince himself was there, given his manners and the importance of his presence. Arcangelo shouted loudly that the escort should correct the situation. Anna, who had already realized that he really was the escort, only nodded and calmly confirmed that everything was now clear. Anna thought that he was perhaps too proud of his mission, since he repeated the same thing so often. Apparently, his role was important to him, and he wanted to emphasize it. The delegation clearly belonged to at least the middle class. This was clear from their behavior and manner of communication. Anna gave the order to the attendant to take care of the prince. After that, she decided to return to her lady and left. Time was not on her side. She had to hurry, because it was becoming more and more dangerous to be around the prince. She could not risk putting off her business. The sooner she left the place, the safer she would be. But the guy didn't lag behind, following her. Anna felt a growing anxiety and was forced to stop, telling him to stop following her. She needed to leave quickly. She added that if he continued to follow her, she would simply scream. There was no threat in her voice, but her words sounded very serious. She hoped that this would stop him. The guy looked surprised and even a little confused after her words. There was confusion in his gaze. He clearly began to doubt her sanity. It was noticeable from his facial expression. At this moment, his servant approached him and, noticing the strangeness in his master's behavior, asked whether His Highness had called him. The question sounded with obvious interest, as if he was expecting some important command. His Highness, after a moment's thought, said Anna Theodore's name. His voice was calm, but there was a hint of concern in it. He clearly couldn't understand why this woman had made such an impression on him. The boy couldn't understand what His Highness was talking about. He knew that Anna was something important to the Baldwins, but why exactly she attracted his attention, he couldn't figure out. He continued to be perplexed. Arcangelo von Attila, the fourth prince of Attila, was a man accustomed to special attention, but his curiosity about Anna was something new and strange. His thoughts were still preoccupied with her personality. Anna's friend, seeing her return from the banquet, reminded her that she would need to take her medicine as soon as they returned. Anna nodded, knowing that this requirement was important for her health and well-being. Deborah noted that she needed to make sure of this, otherwise she risked forgetting, as she always lost the thread of a conversation if she didn't write it down. This seemed important to her. Anna replied that she would definitely do it. She also asked how things were with her friend, because everything that concerned Deborah always worried her. Deborah pointed out that Anna should pay attention to the middle of the room. Something unusual was happening there that had caught their attention. It was important to notice all the details. In the center of the hall, no one noticed the presence of the prince, Mrs. Natasha, and one other person, which caused some confusion in both of them. It was strange. Anna couldn't understand who this man was. She hadn't seen him before, and this immediately intrigued her. She became curious about what family he was from, who he was. Deborah wasted no time in informing him that it was His Highness, the Crown Prince. Anna was shocked to hear this and only looked at him in surprise. Anna noticed that the prince was not at all like the second prince, and this emphasized his uniqueness. He was very different, and it could not help but catch the eye. If His Highness was an example of a worthy heir, then Prince Ivon was the embodiment of a mischievous angel, which left no one in the hall indifferent. Ivon behaved in such a way that it was impossible not to notice him. He was in plain sight. His behavior attracted attention. He was the very embodiment of charm. But until that moment, Anna thought that Prince Ivon overshadowed the crown prince himself, standing out with his bright personality and charisma. She gently pointed out that perhaps she shouldn't say that, although her own opinion was similar. Her thoughts often overlapped with Deborah's. Prince Ivon had something special that made him inconspicuous. It attracted attention, and it is not surprising that he could not remember even the names of his maids. It was hard for him to remember everyone who came up to him. The people around him changed so quickly. It was a part of his life, to which he was accustomed. Anna heard the lady calling her and immediately knew that something was wrong. She immediately felt that her attention needed to be switched to something important. Approaching the lady, she asked Mrs. Natasha if she had called her and her friend, because Anna could not imagine what exactly had caused her call. Natasha replied that she needed to get a shawl from the carriage. It seemed like a simple errand, but Anna realized that there was more to it. Natasha also noted that Anna probably saw a man in a gray suit on the second-floor terrace, which added to her curiosity. It was Benjamin Owen, the Marquis's son. His appearance in this house was always connected with something important, and now the maid had to secretly pass him a note so as not to attract attention. Anna, despite all her concern, assured the maid that she could trust her. She was ready to help because she understood the importance of this action for the future of her lady and decided to trust her. The maid, with a thrill in her chest, knew that she had to do this for the sake of her lady's future. It was not easy, but she knew that she could not do without her help, and she carried out the task with determination. At the bottom of the stairs, just around the corner, the unknown awaited her. The maid felt a little afraid, but she knew she had to do her job. She had already taken a step and was moving forward. If the maid went up the stairs in the hall, she would certainly be noticed. She was too careful, knowing that every step she took could attract attention, and this could disrupt the plans of the entire operation. As she passed by, a knife was thrown towards her. It was a stranger, and she did not have time to react. The knife only slightly grazed her, but this was already a harbinger of danger. The knife almost caused her serious harm, but the girl still felt horror. The noble maid, accustomed to difficult situations, could not calmly accept what had happened. She was in a panic, especially when a stranger appeared next to her. She couldn't understand what was happening, and her heart was pounding with fear when he came too close. The man knocked her down and asked her curiously where she had learned this information. It was too important a question, and she could be in great danger if she revealed the truth. The girl did not understand at all what was happening, and the stranger continued to assure her that she should not make excuses. He declared that the chance that brought her here was not an excuse. They found a note in her hands, and now they asked her what it was. The question was direct and decisive, without a hint of understanding or compassion. Several more people came out of the crowd and began to ask if she had fallen asleep there, or if there was some other reason she was in this place. The questions poured out one after another. The stranger standing next to the girl claimed that she had no weapon, and in general, it was obvious that she was not trained in fencing. All this only complicated the situation and the questions. The girl thought she was just a maid who was supposed to deliver a note. It was a letter from Natasha Baldwin, addressed to Mr. Benjamin, and she did not understand why everything was so confused. At that moment, a man came out of the crowd and immediately realized that this letter was for his son. He asked to return it without delay. The man was Arnold Owen, Marquis. He took the letter with anger and determination, giving no explanation and not hiding his rage. He was furious and could not understand how the Count could so underestimate his control over his daughter. All this irritated him greatly, and he did not know how to react. Only 2 weeks had passed since the Count had promised his daughter. He could not believe that everything had already turned out this way and felt deceived. His Highness gently suggested that the Marquis should speak more quietly, but he continued to shout, accusing the Count's daughter of writing a love letter to his son. The Marquis's losses were enormous. The girl began to realize what was happening when she heard one of the men being addressed as His Highness. It changed something in her perception of the situation. He told the Marquis not to make him repeat himself, and she realized that before her stood His Highness, Prince Lennox. Suddenly, everything fell into place. Lennox said that he would now deal with this Marquis himself. He was sure that everything would be resolved now. Besides, Vane said that no one would be in this place. The girl apologized, saying that it was all her fault. She asked what to do with this maid now, because everything had happened so unexpectedly. Anna was completely confused. Her thoughts were jumbled, but one thing was clear. Something was wrong around her. She found herself drawn into strange events that she could not control. These people were involved in things that no one should know about. Anna became an unwitting witness, and now they were ordered to get rid of her without leaving a trace. The realization hit her that she could die right here, that her life could end like this. It was horrible and incomprehensible. Something had changed irrevocably. Anna couldn't believe what was happening. If she had somehow predicted that she would find herself in this situation, she probably would have done everything differently to avoid it. She tried to deny what was happening, convincing herself that this couldn't be happening, that it was just a nightmare. But alas, reality was merciless and cruel. Tears were streaming down her cheeks. She was praying to God for help, asking him to save her life. Inside, there was a feeling of helplessness, and fear for the future filled her. But then the second prince intervened and commented on the situation, saying that it seemed like she was really almost killed, and it was no joke. Lennox immediately recognized that familiar, arrogant voice that could only belong to Ivon. That voice always sounded with a sense of authority, brooking no objections. Ivon ordered everyone to stay put, emphasizing that if they moved, the poison would spread faster. His words sounded confident and left no room for doubt. Lennox noted that he should have worn something black, as his suit was stained. He watched the proceedings, slightly annoyed that he could not act faster. Ivon did not hide his displeasure, and asked his brother if he was happy with what had happened, as if asking how he assessed the situation. He noticed that his younger brother would not let him stray from the path, even if he wanted to do something against the rules. There was a certain confidence in this, no matter how much they tried to distract him. Lennox continued to look at him silently, and Ivon, noticing his gaze, told him to stop looking at him like that, as if he was trying to hide or understand something. If someone sees them at this moment, they might feel like they are trying to commit murder, and things will not be perceived as they intended. The crown prince, noticing that his brother was watching him closely, decided to ask if he had been watching his actions in the last few minutes, trying to understand his intentions. Ivon smiled and noted that perhaps his brother valued morality too highly to participate in such dubious affairs. His beloved's maid disappeared into the darkness and did not return for a long time. He had already begun to think that the maid might have joined some secret meeting or just gone for a walk. But these thoughts did not give him peace, and he decided to figure it out. Lennox asked his brother again if he cared about the fate of his mistress's maid, for it must have been important to him, although Ivon showed no particular interest. The gentleman replied that, of course, he was not indifferent to everything that concerned his loved ones. He was a sensitive and attentive partner who cared for those he loved. But at the same time, he emphasized that he is also a generous brother who is able to turn a blind eye to the possible misdeeds of his elder brother, because his kindness has no limits. Lennox just shrugged, not understanding what his brother meant. He was confused, but he didn't argue, realizing that it all sounded more like ulterior motives. He had spoken with Marquis Owen about business and their trading relations, but the situation with the missing maid had been troubling him, as it was clearly connected to something more. They simply wanted to intimidate this maid, but Ivon intervened, saying that he was interested in why such matters were being discussed in a dark corner of the courtyard. The Marquis, trying to justify himself, offered to somehow explain what had happened, but the Crown Prince immediately noted that they should have had such conversations in a brighter place. He said that their actions could be misunderstood, and they should be careful not to create unnecessary suspicion among those watching them. It's all because of people like Guienne, who are always ready to dig up dirt if there is the slightest opportunity to undermine Marcus Owen and question his integrity. Lennox found a more suitable place where there were no people and told his brother that here they could discuss everything without unnecessary witnesses. But Ivon immediately approached him. Ivon warned Lennox that the dark corners were always full of enemies, ready to take advantage of any weakness, and that they must be careful in their actions. He was grateful for this advice, and as a token of gratitude, wanted to tell his brother something important that could change their attitude towards what was happening in the future. Brother must understand that not everyone strives for power, and the throne is not always the goal for everyone in this world, so his impatient behavior seems unnecessary. He apparently did not think about the fact that there might be other goals in his desire for power, and that not everyone shared his desires, but he continued to think that everything would be as it should be. Lennox was noticeably angry, but despite this, he still tried to hide his storm of emotions behind a restrained smile, and thanked his brother for his words, but with a little sarcasm. The sarcasm was obvious, and Lennox's face showed a play of tension that reflected his inner tension. But on the outside, it looked like normal, polite communication that hid his true feelings. Lennox was clearly suddenly shocked when, in the midst of their conversation, the second prince suddenly appeared, breaking the calm atmosphere, and all eyes instantly turned to him. At such moments, any mistake could ruin everything, and therefore the Marquis worried more than he should have, because any wrong word could cost much more than it seemed at first glance. However, fortunately, everything worked out, and the tension that seemed all-consuming went away. Perhaps all the worries were in vain, and the situation was resolved peacefully. The prince was clearly disappointed, and admitted that the young man had no understanding of the situation, and that his words did not reflect what was really happening. The marquise, in turn, asked him again, not understanding what exactly the prince was talking about, and was shocked by the answer, which made him think about many things, because everything turned out to be much more complicated. Lennox looked extremely sinister, and with a bright, brutal smile, declared that he was absolutely not interested in the throne, but what was much more important was what was happening to him and his loved ones. The Marquis was horrified by what he heard. His head was literally ready to explode from this revelation, because such words were shocking and completely unexpected. He got into this dirty game of smuggling not to play political games, but only to earn a living, with no ambitions for power. Lennox knew he couldn't just die in a battle between wild and ruthless forces, so he decided it was time to stop all this and find a way out of this nightmare. He knew that he needed to finish all these things as soon as possible in order to finally be next to Natasha, thereby getting rid of all the problems and fear that pulled him into this world. He approached Anna and, extending his long arm, asked if she was okay, expressing in his gaze a care and attention that was rarely seen in such surroundings. He had incredibly beautiful hands, which emphasized his sophistication and elegance. Anna noticed this gesture, and despite the external coldness, she felt its sincerity. The girl sincerely felt gratitude for the help given to her. She could not help but appreciate how the man came to the rescue in time, at the right moment, and without unnecessary words. She tried to find words to express her gratitude, but at some point she realized that she simply did not know how and what exactly to thank him for. The gentleman noted that perhaps she would have a trace of the injury left behind, and that it could leave a scar, reminding her of what had happened, something the girl could not help but think about at that moment. However, the girl confidently said that it did not matter much to her, and that this scar would not interfere with her daily work. She could continue to perform her duties without problems. Ivon was not indifferent, and asked again if it was okay for her to continue using her hands after Lennox grabbed her wrist, expressing concern. The girl calmly noted that the mark left on her body had nothing to do with her service, and should not interfere with her work process. It was nothing more than an accident. The ball, in fact, was a place not only for entertainment and fun, but also an important element of the life of the aristocracy, where important issues were decided and significant meetings took place. The girl sighed, but there was gratitude in her words. She realized that for her this evening was not just entertainment, but also an opportunity for new meetings and experiences. Ivon said that if she was still grateful for the help, she should not tell anyone, especially her mistress, about what happened, keeping it a secret. He emphasized that money was just a material value, and her life and safety were more important. She thought about it, asking herself, is there anything else ahead that is worth waiting for? In response, she promised that she would take his words into account and remember what he said. But suddenly, her attention was drawn to the question that he suddenly decided to ask her. He found a note and picked it up, wondering if she was the one who was supposed to give it to him, deciding that it was now her responsibility to him. She screamed that the document belonged to her and tried to stop him, but he only raised his hand higher, making it clear that he would now have the note. He picked it up carefully, and now the note was his, although perhaps he thought she was supposed to give it to Benjamin. The girl tried to convince herself that this was not true. Ivon, confidently stating that he knew that she could not speak the language of Ethiel, explained the situation without further ado. The letter was written in the royal language, and even if their relationship did not last long, Ivon understood that he had to do it, because such things do not go unnoticed. Anna did not think that His Highness should know the contents of the letter. Ivon looked at her, thinking that she was there to deliver it. The girl understood that this was her task. She confirmed his assumption. Vaughn remarked that Natasha should prepare herself, and the maid, hearing this, thanked him for the instruction and agreed to continue her work. She thought he smiled when he was angry. However, he only noted that he had already told her that he was a generous lover, not hiding his attitude to the situation, leaving her to ponder. It was too dismissive of him. Even if his words were said with some purpose, the girl felt that it was not very appropriate and even offensive. She thought it would be better to go home early and rest. However, there was still much work to do, and she had to decide what was more important, her own convenience or her obligations. The girl insisted that everything was fine, despite her fatigue. Her work was not yet finished, and she felt the need to finish the job without stopping halfway. Life is hard for maids, and the girl almost died. But now she was determined to finish her job. Even in spite of everything, she wanted to see it through to the end, as it should be. However, she had to finish the job because she felt responsible for her duties. It was her job, and she couldn't afford to leave it unfinished. So she decided to hurry. She had to say that everything was okay, so she could continue on her way. She knew she had to move on without delay. Mr. Ivon sighed. He said he was curious if there was another exit nearby. His remark showed that he was looking for an option to resolve the current situation. At that moment, a guy appeared from behind the wall. His figure appeared, and he stepped forward, as if expecting that his appearance had attracted the attention of everyone present. He said that he knew nothing about it, but Ivon, with a confident smile, noted that he definitely knew everything, even if he did not want to admit it. The guy asked that his being warn him the next time he decides to do something. He admitted that he almost died of cardiac arrest when this happened. It was Sharon Neville, Ivon's senior assistant. The prince seemed to know that the servant actually got some pleasure from such incidents, although he tried to hide it. The assistant, feeling the pressure, insisted that the gentleman stop talking nonsense, claiming that he would resign after all. Ivon responded by saying that he had already paid him as much for the transportation as last time. Sharon promised to return all the money, which could not help but bring a slight smile to Ivon's face. He was calm, knowing that there would be no problems with this. On the left wall, right in the center, an emergency staircase was installed, providing a convenient exit for anyone who might find themselves in a dangerous situation in this building. Anna was truly grateful for the information she received. It was an important clarification that helped her better navigate the space and plan her next steps. She had to hurry now, but she knew she had to be careful and not waste time. She took a step towards the exit, deciding to move faster. At that moment, the thought occurred to her that perhaps she should have chosen more comfortable shoes to get to her destination faster. Comfort became a priority for her. As Anna began to walk away, Ivon called out to her, and she had to stop and turn around to hear what he wanted to tell her at the last moment. He noted that she should definitely take care of her wounds. There was concern in his voice, and he reminded her, just in case, that her health should not be ignored. The girl, a little embarrassed by his attention, looked at him. An unexpected revelation flashed in her eyes, as if her hidden feelings had become obvious at that moment. When Anna returned home, she immediately asked Phoebe where her bank account was. Phoebe replied that it was in the last drawer, in the smallest bag. Then, Anna asked Phoebe what she should do if she couldn't come. The girl replied that in that case, she would have to take her bag to her aunt's house. After that, Auntie asked what she couldn't do with the bank book. Phoebe immediately said that she couldn't show it to anyone, and she definitely couldn't tell Alice about it. After all this, Anna told Phoebe that she was a good girl and did well. The girl looked pleased that she remembered everything and followed all the instructions. But Phoebe thought about it and asked if it was necessary to talk about it at night, because she was very tired and really wanted to rest. The aunt apologized, noting that she was just in a hurry, but now she needed to rest a little. She said that it would be best for her to go to bed early so that she could sleep peacefully. Phoebe noticed that her aunt looked too pale and asked if something unpleasant had happened. There was concern in her voice. She could not understand the reason for such a state. Anna replied that nothing terrible had happened. She had just been washing her face for too long. It was just a moment of fatigue, and everything was fine. Anna reassured the girl, saying that she shouldn't worry. It was best to go to bed early to rest and gain strength. After Anna put her niece to bed, she felt relieved, glad that she was able to return home alive and safe. If she had died, she would not be able to enjoy her exquisite and wonderful appearance today, which until now remained for her the embodiment of beauty and living art. This hand was far from the most beautiful, and so she always hid it from her niece's sight, trying to hide the traces of the hard work and deprivation she had endured. This was a given, since she acted as a mother to her niece, raising her in conditions where there was neither peace nor comfort, always thinking about her well-being. This served as some proof of her difficult trials, and although she was not ashamed of her life, on the contrary, she felt pride in her survival. Ivon still inquired about her condition. He extended his hand to her, and at that moment she felt for the first time how worn out her hands were by life, battered and covered with traces of numerous difficulties. She could not forget those moments when his image and touch remained with her. The past, when his hand saved her, made her think about faith and why people come to God. The blood froze in her veins from fear, but at the same time an unexpected relief came, because she realized that perhaps her fate had changed thanks to Ivon's intervention. At that moment of salvation, when it seemed that she could no longer fight, she felt an unimaginable power of faith, as if fate itself had once again opened new horizons for her. If His Highness had not intervened, if he had not come at the most opportune moment, she might not have really survived that incident and would not have known what awaited her in the future. He didn't say a word. He just did what was necessary, allowing her to survive. And her thoughts that she could have disappeared did not leave her even after the situation was resolved. He saved her, even if it happened by accident, even if his actions were not dictated by a desire to help, but only by a random coincidence. Even though it may have been about preventing injustice, he still gave her a chance to live, and she will never forget that act, no matter what happens next. Anna was very grateful that he allowed her to continue to lead such a modest life. She always prayed for this opportunity, which she sincerely considered important. She decided that she would definitely pray for him. It was her personal decision, and she sincerely hoped that he would receive all the blessings he deserved. Anna, surprised, asked whether the second prince had really come. She could not understand how it happened that she did not know about his visit. Annie noticed that the prince had come this afternoon, and added that Deborah was supposed to pass this on to Anne. She had asked her to pass this information on herself. However, Anna had not heard anything about this and was very surprised. Annie thought that perhaps Deborah had simply forgotten to tell her the important news. There was nothing strange about Deborah suddenly leaving, packing up all her things, and going to the laundry room. She was always looking for something to do. Lady Natasha was always short of staff, so she was literally like a squirrel in a wheel, constantly fussing. Annie advised Anna to change into a clean and neat dress. Anna asked what she should do as she had no clean day clothes. Annie was surprised as she had recently washed her clothes, and they were fine. Anna explained that she had been extremely busy this week, and despite having another set of clothes, she had not been able to remove the stain from the previous one. She wasn't sure he would understand the whole situation if he wore her uniform again, since he had already noticed that it was stained. This worry was bothering her. Even if you didn't look too closely, the stains would still be visible, and this worried her because she couldn't afford to look untidy. Time was limited, and she realized she couldn't handle it, so she asked Annie to lend her uniform, hoping it would help solve her problem. She offered to lend the girl her clothes in exchange for a promise to buy her some books that were her favorites, thinking that it would be a good deal. Since it was summer, Anna decided that she needed to take some time to rest, to take a short break, to get away from her affairs and concerns, which she always paid attention to. Remembering Deborah's words, she realized that His Highness had arrived. True, she had completely forgotten to tell him about it, and now she felt embarrassed for her forgetfulness. She apologized to Anna, explaining that at the moment she needed to do her work, and she herself could rest in peace, since there were no urgent matters. Although her friend suggested that she take a rest, Anna realized that if she did the laundry, she would end up without work, which would also be unpleasant and disturbing. As a result, she had no choice, and she knew that if she did nothing, she would simply be idle, hanging around the house with no clear purpose. She looked at the estate, and her thoughts returned to the prince. The memory washed over her, and she couldn't get the image out of her head. She quickly turned away, feeling her face flush as she remembered that he was probably in the waiting room right now, and her heart started beating faster again. She knew she had to do something, but she wasn't quite sure what. Everything was too confusing, and she didn't know what to do next. In any case, only she could remember what happened that night. He was always like that, acting as usual, despite the fact that the situation was quite unusual. She didn't want any special connection between them. After all, he had just saved her, and that shouldn't mean anything more. However, the smell of cigarettes interrupted her thoughts. It was familiar and immediately caught her attention. She became curious about who had decided to break the rules and smoke in the non-smoking area. This made her a little angry, but she did not allow herself to dwell on it for long. When it was time to work, this person simply decided to relax, and she could not afford to be distracted. Time was of the essence. Turning in that direction, she immediately noticed him. Prince Ivon was sitting there, and although her attention was held, she did not immediately recognize him. At first, she even tried to say something to him, but the words did not come to her mind. She was confused, not understanding what was happening, but when she finally opened her eyes, she immediately recognized him and hastened to greet His Most Illustrious Majesty, feeling slightly embarrassed. He asked if she had taken care of her wounds, and she confirmed that everything was fine, although she seemed a little embarrassed by his attention. Anna thanked him again for his help, for what he did for her, and expressed her gratitude. She said that despite everything that was happening, she would not tell anyone about the events of the previous night. It was a promise she decided to keep. At that moment, she wondered how long he had been sitting there, watching her. It made her feel a little uneasy and wary. She still couldn't understand what made him sit here. The reasons for his presence remained a mystery to her, and this caused a slight bewilderment in her soul. Why did he come today? On the one hand, she was grateful for his presence, but on the other, she felt a little awkward. It was a strange and uncomfortable feeling when he was so close. There was a faint scent of flowers in the air, and she couldn't help but wonder. Had he always been so bright, or was it only now that she had begun to notice these little things in his behavior? A strange, ticklish feeling arose in her heart, and she could not understand what exactly it meant. It was something new, unclear, that confused her, but made her think. Turning around, she started to walk away, but Ivon suddenly asked her where she was going. His interest was unexpected, and it made her stop for a moment. She replied that she was going to see Lady Natasha, who was now in her bedroom. There was politeness in her voice, but she could feel the tension lingering. Ivon confirmed her words, but added that she should not go to the lady, since, in his opinion, the lady was sleeping now. His tone was decisive, and she realized that he did not like her intention. She just nodded in response, agreeing with him, but inside, she felt that this situation was bothering her a little. Her reaction should have been cold. She should have remained calm and unperturbed. The maid shouldn't be interested in what they were doing, much less why the lady was sleeping. But despite that, she still had to go and take care of the lady, ignoring the conversation with Ivon. He asked her to stop, his voice soft but urgent. She froze, unsure of what to do, but feeling that his request was more important than her own plans. He said that if he had anything important to say, he could do it from here. She heard him perfectly, and it seemed that her actions no longer mattered at this point. He looked at her carefully, and the holy girl, realizing that it was useless to argue, silently came closer, accepting his demands, although she did not understand why all this was necessary. He asked her to come closer, a little closer, and her steps became even slower, as if that wasn't enough for him. It was a new gesture that she couldn't quite understand. Ivon decided that she might just be joking with him, and then his request became more insistent. He told her to come straight to him, without taking a single extra step. Finally, she, clearly hesitating, decided to come very close, not knowing what exactly he wanted from her. It was a strange and unclear demand that left her perplexed. He told her to turn her back to him, but the girl, not understanding the whole point, stopped, not knowing why and where all this was leading. Everything that was happening was a mystery to her. Suddenly, he grabbed her by the waist, and feeling his hands, she immediately became afraid. The gesture he performed was unexpected. Fear overwhelmed her, and she did not know how to react. Turning to him, he calmly explained that the ribbon on her apron had come undone, and she was surprised that he had noticed. It had all seemed so sudden that she couldn't understand what had happened. Indeed, the ribbon was untied, but the girl could not understand why it was so important for him to interfere with this. Her thought was that it did not make sense, but she still remained in place. Anna, a little confused, repeated his words in her head, trying to understand what exactly he wanted from her, but the gentleman insisted that she simply not move, not take a single extra step. He noticed that she was trying to make sure that everything was okay, and now that everything looked okay, she could go, for she had only one desire: to go to her lady. Anna, still not entirely sure about the situation, thanked him, and he, in turn, told her that pink really suited her image, although in fact, it was not quite so. The girl, of course, did not understand what exactly he wanted to say by this, because she was not wearing anything pink, and it was difficult for her to understand how this detail could be so noticeable. She hoped she hadn't gotten anything dirty, but she still couldn't understand why he'd said that, since there was no pink on her clothes. Since she had borrowed the uniform from Annie, she noticed that the uniform was a little too small, so to keep it from falling off, she pinned it down, hoping that would be enough. The moment she turned around and headed back, she remembered that her underwear was pink and immediately felt embarrassed, realizing that he could see it. Her face flushed when she realized that he could notice her underwear, and this did not add confidence, because she was not ready for someone to pay attention to such intimate moments. Phoebe, noticing her confusion, suggested that her aunt had a headache and tried to figure out what exactly was bothering her. But Anna quickly deflected the conversation, saying that she was fine and it was nothing more than dizziness. She felt awkward and did not understand how this man, who always behaved so casually, managed to notice such a detail, and how it could happen without leaving any traces. The girl felt especially uncomfortable and could not believe that this cheeky man had managed to see her underwear, which only increased her embarrassment and awkwardness. Dressed in a raincoat, she entered the bar, and the man, seeing her, asked with interest what she would like to drink, peering into her face, as if trying to catch some hint. She ordered a glass of red rum, and the waiter, of course, readily complied with her request, hoping that the drink would be appropriate for her mood and the situation. When the waiter handed her the glass, there was a note written on red paper in it, and this unexpected circumstance only increased her confusion, because she did not know how to react. This letter in red made her very angry, and she could not contain her emotions, wondering what kind of nonsense could be hidden in this unexpected note. Someone said that it was a recording from the Marquis of Owen, and this left her with even more questions, as she did not understand what he could want from her, especially in such a situation. Ivon stood behind him in disguise, asking with interest how things were going, trying to understand what stage the whole plan was at. He was clearly determined and ready to act. Natasha was sure that the Owen family had signed a contract with Baldwin. There was one important step left for her: to complete this process, to see it through to the end without leaving a chance for error. Ivon asked when they would begin the next stage. Natasha said it would be in 15 days. First, they would announce their engagement to Marquis Owen, and then the main part would begin. Natasha did not hide her joy. Pretending to be the Marquis's mistress seemed to her not only exciting, but also profitable. The price of her body, in her opinion, increased significantly thanks to this role. The crazier a man is, the more he desires anything connected to the imperial family. The evidence he showed her in the drawing room was important. and she realized that she had to be sure of its authenticity. Natasha noticed that the family she wanted to destroy was not Owen, but the Baldwins. This was her main goal, and she was ready to go through everything to achieve this goal. She asked Ivon if she could overthrow her father with this plan. Ivon replied that drug smuggling was a grave sin, and the consequences would be dire for all involved. Based on this information, Natasha could expect to escape punishment, since her actions would not be directly related to smuggling, and this gave her an advantage. But for others, it would be much worse. The Baldwin family would lose all their property, and their family would suffer the death penalty. Prince Ivon reminded Natasha of this cruel outcome. Natasha decided that this was how it had to be. She had no doubt that she had to destroy the entire Baldwin family, because this was part of her long-awaited plan, which she had been preparing for a long time. Ivon promised that he would do everything to make it happen. Natasha was pleased. Thanks to the prince's help, everything went more or less smoothly, and she was confident of success. Anna still can't understand why this man is helping her so actively. She doesn't see any reason why he should deal with her problems. It confuses her. While she is tormented by questions, Ivon, sitting calmly in a chair, asked for a glass of beer. It seems that for him, all this is nothing more than a game. Everything is so simple and easy for him. Even though he finds her situation quite interesting, he shows no particular interest in her motivations. He lives solely for his own pleasure and doesn't bother. In reality, nothing touches him, and if this girl's offer had attracted him in any way, he would have found the source of this drug himself. It would not cost him anything to solve this issue. At first glance, he has no flaws. He looks like he has never experienced difficulties and has always been on top. No doubts or worries. She can't hide her irritation. In response to her look, Ivon asked what surprised her so much. The girl only smiled and answered that nothing important. This left her in thought. She silently hopes that His Highness will not get what he really wants. This was the hidden cursed look she deliberately cast in his direction. Ivon, noticing her hidden tension, asked if she had come alone. Natasha, holding back her emotions, replied that she had come with a maid and a small child, with whom she had recently been in the carriage. Ivon suggested having dinner together, hoping for a warmer and more open conversation. It was their first meeting in the shopping district, but Natasha declined, saying she had another meeting. He was surprised by her answer, but Natasha explained that since her family was about to fall apart, she had to learn to live on. She had a meeting with a banker with whom she needed to discuss important matters. Natasha prepared her steps in advance. She decided how to steal her property so that she would be prepared for possible consequences. Her actions became more decisive. Meanwhile, Anna went to the market. She needed to buy books for Annie because she helped her last time, and she couldn't leave her without gratitude. Approaching the shop with bows, Anna became interested in their price and decided to find out how much these beautiful hair decorations cost. She thought that such bows would be perfect for her niece, and she wanted to buy at least one as a gift to please the girl. The saleswoman noticed her interest and praised her taste, saying that she usually sold such bows for 2 silver pieces, but would make an exception for her and sell them for 1. Anna was shocked by the price, because it was almost like a 2-day stay in a hotel. She couldn't believe that such things could cost so much. Realizing that this was simply absurd, Anna decided to leave and look for something more reasonable elsewhere, because this looked like a real robbery. The saleswoman, noticing her discontent, offered to lower the price to 800 bronze coins. But Anna replied that she did not need it. She was not going to spend that kind of money. The woman, not wanting to lose a client, lowered the price even more, first to 500 and then to 400 bronze coins. But Anna remained adamant. Then the girl noticed a man standing nearby and immediately recognized him. It was the same man who had once introduced himself as her escort. As she approached, her surprise knew no bounds. It was Arcangelo, the same man she had recently met. He was there on business. Anna decided to approach him to say hello, and noticed how he smiled slightly when he saw her. She remembered how they communicated last time. Seeing a man next to him, Anna immediately realized that this was most likely His Highness. She had seen his face somewhere before, but she couldn't remember where exactly. The man looked elegant and refined, which only confirmed her suspicions. She decided that he was definitely from the delegation that was supposed to arrive that day. Perhaps it was the ambassador. So she bowed, apologized, and admitted that she was upset at not recognizing him immediately. Her apology sounded sincere. She welcomed him to the empire, but the man began to speak in his own language, which made her a little embarrassed. It was unexpected for her, but she tried not to show it. The man reassured her, saying that it was okay, because it was always a little awkward to meet someone who knew your native language, especially in such a context. She apologized again, explaining that she had not expected him to be so fluent in Imperial, and it had surprised her a little, though she tried to appear confident. The guy said with a smile that he really had outstanding skills in the Imperial language, as he had lived in the Empire for a long time, which helped him master the speech. He noted that he spent a lot of time with the fourth prince of Ithila and was responsible for his safety and escort. It was an important experience that developed his communication skills. She noted that she also had to greet the prince, but admitted that she was not at all familiar with the local etiquette and did not know how to behave properly in this case. However, the gentleman told her not to worry about it, assuring her that she had arrived just in time. He was tired and wanted her to show his escort around. Anna was a little surprised, but quickly realized that she had a little more time, since the Holy Lady had not yet returned. Time was at her disposal, and she could wait a little. She said she had about 2 hours, and confidently added that this would be enough time to organize everything. In response, he said that he was leaving his lordship to her. She noticed that the guy was clearly dozing, and given his condition, she decided not to disturb him and let him rest a little without interfering with his sleep. Turning to the gentleman, she asked if he had any preferences as to where he would like to go, to which he replied that he was ready to follow her, without any particular preferences. The girl realized that this probably meant that the choice of location was hers. He confirmed once again that he would follow her, trusting her decisions. He had already managed to visit several palaces and other significant places in the empire, which gave him confidence that this trip would also be interesting. She then offered to tell him about the latest trends in the Cadogan Empire to make their time more educational and exciting. She decided to start the conversation with gastronomy and bought him a banana pancake, hoping that it would be a pleasant surprise for his taste buds. She offered him to try at least a piece, assuring him that the dish was incredibly tasty and popular among locals and tourists. When he tasted the pancake, his face immediately changed, and judging by his expression, he really liked it. It was a popular dish among tourists. She noticed that the ice cream had melted and left a mark near his lips and on his cheek, which did not go unnoticed, because it was quite funny. He started to wipe his face, but she noticed that he was not doing it quite correctly, and with a smile reminded him that he should wipe another place. Unable to resist, she walked up to him and wiped the ice cream herself, which slightly embarrassed him, and he blushed in surprise and was a little confused. She gently told him to eat slowly. There was no need to rush. They were in no hurry, and time was on their side, so they could enjoy the moment. Suddenly, she noticed that he was dirty with ice cream again, and this made her smile, because she was already used to his clumsiness and slight confusion. She suggested that he go to the fountain, where it would be more convenient to wash his face, since the ice cream was not only on his lips, but also on his cheek, and perhaps he simply liked the taste. Taking his hand lightly, she noticed how slightly agitated he was, and realized that his unexpected anxiety was caused by her concern and attention to his minor troubles. She approached him with the expectation that he would be interested in trying it again, but this time strawberry, unlike the previous version. She thought he would want it. Strawberries are small, bright red fruits with a much more refreshing and unique flavor, unlike bananas which, although sweet, have a less vibrant flavor that is more familiar and ordinary. Suddenly, at that moment, another voice reached her ears, declaring that he did not agree, and his appetite for fruit had already disappeared. Somehow he was immediately disappointed in this choice, not wanting to continue. She turned around, but at that moment she remembered the voice, and looking up, she saw His Highness Ivon standing before her. He said that he was not a fan of fruit and would rather have something else. She had never heard anything like this from him before, because the woman who had almost died of fatigue was now about to finish her work. It was completely unexpected, and she didn't know how to react. She realized that she had wandered too far from where the ladies she was supposed to be working for were, and began to realize that she had missed the moment when she should have returned and continued her task. The tall man, with silver blue hair and dark skin, looked quite attractive, and his style and manners, as well as his figure itself, could not help but attract the attention of those around him, including Ivon. Everyone present was interested in his origins, and Ivon, watching him, assumed that he was just another foreigner who could be connected with important matters. But for now it remained a mystery. However, as soon as Ivon turned around and saw the man again, he realized that his guesses could have been wrong, because this was something more significant than just a traveler or a casual acquaintance. He heard the girl offer the man a strawberry pancake, but at that moment, only Ivon intervened, sensing that the situation was taking an unusual turn that could raise questions from everyone. The girl did not quite understand what was happening in this situation, and, remaining in the dark, continued to give a tour to Mr. Arcangelo, despite all the strange things that arose around them. She couldn't comprehend what was really happening, and despite a growing sense of bewilderment, she continued to give her master a tour, not understanding how it would end for everyone. She took him to a bookstore located in the oldest part of the city, where the shops were firmly rooted in history. The area was full of old books and rare editions. Once there, she continued to accompany the prince, as they had agreed. Arcangelo informed his brother that there had been a misunderstanding. The maid had mistaken him for a servant. Ivon asked if his brother had realized who he really was, and promised to keep the moment a secret. In exchange for this, he would like them all to go together. Anna did not understand their conversation at all. Especially, she could not figure out why Ivon was pointing his finger at her. She felt like a stranger among these people and their unfamiliar words. Ivon noticed that the servant obviously wanted to join them. If the girl did not object, he was ready to keep her company, because the duty of the imperial family required help and attention. The girl was surprised by such a proposal. Ivon thought that she was probably against it, and suggested that they could go to Natasha if she decided so. But unexpectedly, the girl agreed, and said that she was not against it. This surprised Ivon, because he did not expect such an answer and was not prepared for her decision. She didn't understand how she could say no when he was so insistent. She was even more confused by the thought that her opinion didn't seem to matter. Everything was being decided without her participation. She remembered the moment he helped her the last time he saw her for the first time. Those memories still brought mixed feelings to her soul. She had been feeling ashamed all week, and now her anger was directed specifically at him. All her thoughts revolved around how he had embarrassed her with his behavior. She couldn't understand how he could be so shameless and not feel ashamed of his actions that left her in an uncomfortable position. He clearly felt no remorse or regret. His behavior remained unyielding. This irritated her even more, but there was nothing she could do about it. She told him that there were many unique and beautiful books to be found in this alley. It was one of the reasons why she loved this place so much and felt more confident here. She turned to Mr. Arcangelo and asked if he wanted to buy a book. Her voice was calm, but there was uncertainty in her eyes, as if she had not expected this offer. Ivon was watching her hand closely at this time, remembering how he had said that there might be a scar. The thought of how her life could be changed by this moment flickered in his eyes. Later, Ivon approached Anna and asked if she wanted him to carry the book. He noticed that it looked heavy, which might be uncomfortable for her. Anna was surprised by his offer, but Ivon quickly realized that she considered the book heavy and perhaps was worried about its condition or comfort. She was not yet accustomed to his solicitude. The girl said that there was no need to worry, as it was not such an important thing and did not require him to spend his energy. Ivon, however, began to think that this book might have a special meaning for her. Despite her words, Ivon couldn't help but think that the book symbolized something for Anna. He thought that if she had allowed him to help, he might have learned her secrets. Anna explained that the book really wasn't of any particular value. It was just something her friend had asked her to buy. She couldn't hide her slight awkwardness as she tried to justify the simplicity of the thing. She was already very tired of his attention, hoping that he would finally let her go. Meanwhile, Arcangelo continued to say something in his language, which sounded like a quiet, restless chatter. Ivon, watching the servant, thought that he might be looking to buy Cadogan's book as a souvenir. He thought that a book with illustrations, filled with fairy tales, would be appropriate. Anna, slightly pursing her lips, confirmed that she knew of such a store where one could buy such illustrated books. It was famous among the locals for its large selection of beautiful editions. When they finally arrived at the store, the saleswoman greeted Anna with a friendly expression on her face. She immediately noticed them and said that this man was looking for a suitable book of fairy tales to buy. The saleswoman noticed that they had come to the right place. Ivon approached the counter and asked if she had popular books for maids. His interest was unexpected, but the saleswoman did not express surprise. She didn't understand why he wanted to do this, but Ivon looked at her in such a way that she understood. He thought she regretted not being able to buy more books earlier. This thought clearly bothered him. Ivon was just going to buy something for her as a gift. The saleswoman noticed that her boyfriend was very nice and agreed to show her more books that might be suitable. She was ready to help. The saleswoman led them to a shelf of romance novels, declaring that the books there were of the highest caliber. She proudly offered several popular choices for the maids and her acquaintances. She added that the book she had bought earlier had a new series. The saleswoman said with a smile that Ivon could choose any volume if he was interested. The situation was getting stranger with each passing second. The new episode added a part called Cook in Bed. This title made Anna feel embarrassed, and she didn't know what to say. Everything seemed very awkward and ridiculous. Anna, trying to justify herself, began to say that this book was not for her, but that her friend had simply asked her to buy it. She could not explain how she had ended up in such a situation. It was all strange and awkward. Anna tried to convince Ivon that she had not bought the book for herself. She felt that words could not change what was happening, and tried her best to smooth over the awkwardness of the situation. But Ivon, as always, noticed everything that irritated her. His look said that he understood perfectly well that she was nervous, and this was exactly what made her angry. He knew exactly how to make her feel uncomfortable. This was too much. Anna was becoming more and more irritated. No amount of her attempts to remain calm could stop the flow of embarrassment she felt. She couldn't stand the way Ivon was behaving. He was not a gentleman. First he teased her about her underwear, and now this book. Anna could no longer remain silent and turned to him, saying that he was behaving inappropriately. Ivon, as always, was surprised. He asked if he had really behaved badly, not understanding why she was reacting that way. He noted that he had not done anything that could offend her. She was the one who brought him here, despite the fact that she had a ridiculous love affair with her that was clearly not suitable for such meetings. It all seemed out of place and strange, but that was her role, and she was the one who pretended not to realize that the affair was known. She couldn't admit that it was she who was trying to hide her true intentions and hidden feelings. He did nothing but follow her around naively, oblivious to her ambiguous hints. She was cunning, but he didn't realize how much she hid her true motives. At one point, she suddenly shouted that he had seen her underwear, obviously trying to embarrass him. His face expressed bewilderment, and he could not even understand what she was talking about at that moment. He was taken aback. Many thoughts were running through his head, and he didn't know what exactly she meant. He asked her confusedly what she was really trying to say. She immediately noticed that he had actually told her that pink suited her. It was so unexpected that he immediately began to blush, not knowing how to react to her words. Remembering that moment, he simply smiled and sighed softly, trying to calm down. He felt uneasy about how strange and awkward everything was between them at that moment. Suddenly, he started laughing. She couldn't figure out what made him react like that. All she could see was his laughter, which only seemed to make the situation more awkward. She didn't understand at all why he looked so contented and relaxed. Everything that was happening seemed strange to her, and she couldn't find a reasonable explanation for his behavior. He also said that she probably meant the time he accidentally saw her underwear while she was pinning her uniform. That moment was completely unexpected for him, but he tried not to show it. She insisted that he apologize, but he couldn't understand what he had to apologize for. He was sincerely convinced that he had done nothing wrong, and he didn't understand why she was so upset. Anna then seriously noted that she had in mind exactly this incident and said that the prince should apologize. But he still could not understand what he had done wrong, and complete confusion was visible in his eyes. Arcangelo said that it was truly beautiful, and then smiled again, as if he was enjoying some thought of his own. His words sounded not just gratitude, but a sincere appreciation of the moment. At this time, Arcangelo stood aside, his gaze clouded by the question, not understanding what they were talking about. He felt that not everything was clear, but he was nearby, hoping to catch at least something. After some time, the maid Anna, having collected her things, announced that it was time for her to leave. Her tone was almost solemn. She felt relieved that the day had finally come to an end. There was a note of forgiveness in her words for leaving them, but at the same time Anna was genuinely glad that this day, full of tension and excitement, had come to an end. Anna was already heading towards the lady, preparing for her next duties, when suddenly someone stopped her. It happened unexpectedly, as if someone was trying to get her attention for some important reason. Turning around, she saw Mr. Arcangelo running after her. His steps were quick and determined, which could not fail to attract her attention. He was obviously in a hurry. Anna was puzzled and did not understand what could have happened. Maybe something important happened, or maybe he just forgot something. But why was he rushing to her, leaving all other things behind? Arcangelo ran up and, slightly out of breath, apologized to her. Anna, not understanding the reason for his apology at all, felt a certain awkwardness, but still waited for an explanation. He admitted that he was a prince, and that was why he had to apologize. It sounded like it was an obligation, part of some moral duty he couldn't ignore. Anna was stunned. Her surprise was not due to the fact that he was a prince, but rather that he, despite his status, was apologizing to her. She could not understand what made him do such a thing. Arcangelo apologized again, clarifying that what he said earlier was a lie. He decided to admit that things were not as he said and wanted her to know the truth. Anna smiled and felt relieved that he had finally told her the truth. It was important to her, and she was grateful that his confession was an honest step in their relationship. Of course, the prince did not know the language and desperately tried to explain that he had lied to her. He was confused, not knowing how to express his thoughts correctly, trying to find the right words to explain. She immediately noticed that she realized who he really was. Mr. Arcangelo was not just a servant, but a prince from the kingdom of Ithila. Finding herself in this situation, she remembered all the signs that alerted her. She had realized this a couple of hours ago, when his escort suddenly left. She had watched them hurriedly leave the room, and in that moment, everything had come together in her head. Then everything became clearer. She realized that the guy who was with him ran away almost instantly, leaving the prince alone. This was the final touch, confirming her suspicions. One of the servants simply stood aside and silently watched the prince leave without even saying goodbye. Such strange behavior made her doubt, because usually a servant would show more respect. It was unclear what kind of servant could do this to the prince. This behavior was illogical, especially since the prince himself spoke the imperial language, and his servant could not even understand basic phrases. In such a situation, everything should have been different. The servant should always have translated his master's words. He should have been the one who connected him with those around him. But here, everything was the other way around. She didn't understand why such a servant was next to the prince at all, because everything always happens differently. Usually, a servant is the one who helps his master, and not the other way around. It all seemed like a strange mistake. She thought that the prince might have approached her for real because he felt ashamed of the lie he had told. And for that she was grateful, although deep down she already understood everything, so she decided to forgive him and not bring the quarrel to light. Although everything was clear, she pretended that everything was unexpected for her, realizing that the prince did not want her to know the truth. He asked her why she was so grateful, since he had actually lied to her. He replied that it was because of his honesty and because he had openly admitted it to her. She, in turn, acknowledged his words and was grateful. He noted that honesty and integrity were the most important qualities for anyone working in his house, and emphasized that her words meant a lot to him. However, she responded that she considered him a false servant. He repeated that his name was Archon. The girl was surprised and asked if he wanted her to call him that. His words caused mixed feelings in her, and she did not immediately understand what exactly he expected from her. Reminded that he had previously called himself Mr. Arcangelo, she was a little confused. He could continue to use that title, but she wanted to find out what was more important to him, the name or the title. It seemed that the culture of this kingdom was very different from what she was used to seeing in her own. At first glance, it seemed incredible to her that a maid was allowed to address the prince by his nickname. It was something new for her. She agreed that the next time they met, she would definitely call him Prince Archon. It was unusual for her, but she already felt that this form of address had become natural for her. The guy smiled, and there was such genuine joy on his face that he said he would look forward to the next meeting. He was sure that the time would pass quickly because he liked her. He admitted that he liked her very much, that she made a good impression on him. Perhaps it was because of her dazzling smile that could not fail to attract his attention, but she was not sure. She felt like she didn't understand why he was saying that, but something in his words made her think that maybe she had some connection to the kingdom of Ithila. It remained a mystery. She, a little confused, decided that it was worth deviating and postponing all questions until the next meeting. There was no time for long reflections, and the meeting with him should not be something tense. Mr. Archon remembered her name, although she had only heard it once. However, this moment left her with a lasting impression that he was truly attentive and watching her every move. She remembered Ivon's words about her name being easy to remember, and it made her smile. He apparently doesn't forget such little things, which can sometimes even be pleasant for her ears. The man who had staked his claim on her favor was generally very confused, and she did not remember his words. But something in their conversation stopped her from giving up entirely. At first, she thought he was just in a good mood, because he said that their servant wanted to go with her. It was supposed to be a business proposition, nothing more, but she doubted it. He couldn't force the servant to follow them, because it was the direct duty of the imperial family, but the request to carry the book puzzled her a little. After all, he called her, but not by name, but with some strange sounds. He didn't call her by name, but simply made a vague sound and offered to carry the book, which surprised her a little. It left her with more questions than answers, and she didn't know how to respond properly. Over time, it became clear that he had indeed forgotten her name, although at first she had been surprised at how this could have happened. But there was nothing unusual in his behavior. He was the kind of person who couldn't even remember the names of those who served him daily. He didn't care about the maids, he just didn't pay attention to their personalities. To him, the maids were just doing their job, and that was all he knew about them. Even those who had served him for decades did not remain in his memory. Their names were not remembered. She was just one of his maids, and also his lover. But still he showed her extraordinary kindness, which made her wonder about his feelings. But one day, when he saved her from a dangerous situation, he suddenly called her by name, and she felt something strange that was a little more than just the usual care. As they were walking, he suddenly said the name of the tree, and although it was simple, she couldn't help but notice how beautiful it was. The name seemed to fit the tree itself perfectly. The tree was indeed beautiful, with a pinkish hue that only enhanced the impression of how harmoniously it fit into the surrounding landscape. The color attracted the eye, creating an atmosphere of peace. However, she still couldn't understand what was behind this action. She didn't understand why he even noted it, because it wasn't something important, and he himself didn't seem to know what he did wrong. And at that moment she thought. Questions got mixed up in her head. Why was he treating her like that? What kind of attitude was hidden behind this attention? And in general, how should she feel about it? During this time, her friend Deborah helped her get back on track, providing invaluable assistance in regaining her self-confidence. Deborah always knew how to support her in difficult times and give her strength. Deborah was sure that she had done everything right, and that now she had nothing to worry about. She was convinced that Anna had made the right decision and had done what was right. If only he could see her in that lingerie. She would probably be able to contain her nervous tension, but something in her head was pulling her towards the thought that such a small thing as a pin could be the decisive moment. Anna carefully examined herself in the mirror. Everything looked perfect, and she was pleased with her appearance. Nothing was in the way, everything was in its place, as it should be. However, something strange caught her eye. It was the carelessly tied knot that her tall friend had left behind. It was unlike any other, like a casual gesture, but it still made her think. He told her that this was exactly what he wanted, but he wasn't sure that it was quite what she expected. But the essence of his words remained unclear, and Anna kept trying to figure out what he really meant. The sky above her seemed incredibly beautiful, as if it were a painting by a master. The shining blue expanse of the sky seemed to captivate her, filling her soul with light delight and calm. His mood was also high, as if he was radiating generosity. This made him even more attractive in her eyes, creating an atmosphere of lightness and joy, despite her inner doubts. The maid who served next to him also felt this moment. She trusted him, despite her caution. This gesture was something important to her, although she did not realize it at first. The zinnia, the flower he gave her, was truly wonderful. She felt ashamed when she realized that her reaction to this gift was not entirely appropriate, because she could have appreciated it differently. Anna blushed, feeling a strong sense of shame. The events did not allow her to calmly accept what had happened. It all became too personal and close, causing anxiety in her heart. He should have chosen different words to explain that his attentions were actually innocent. He didn't mean anything like that, but her perception of the situation was different. For him, it was just a trivial event, but for her, it all took on great significance. It became an important detail that stuck in her head despite his indifference. She even continued to keep the ribbon he used to tie her hair. It seemed insignificant, but her heart felt the importance of this gesture as a memory of him. It might have seemed a little silly, but she couldn't help but want to keep it. It was her little memory of him that she didn't want to let go of. She was ashamed that her underwear was not new and not quite neat. It was at this moment that she felt that she was not ready to show him her vulnerability, and all this caused her internal anxiety. A week passed, and thoughts of him still did not leave her. His image did not disappear, as did his gaze, and she continued to think about him, experiencing every word, gesture, and accidental touch. When he finally disappeared, she realized that it was too much. The feelings she experienced were much stronger than she could have imagined. Her soul was filled with emotions that she could not control. Love. That was what she felt. It was this feeling that confused her, because she knew she shouldn't have allowed it. She kept trying to figure out what to do with it. She felt that this feeling would never be mutual, that she would never wait for a response. Her heart was full of doubts, and her soul was tormented by the fear that her feelings would not be shared. Anna had absolutely no idea what to do with this, how she could love him, someone who was so far away and unattainable for her. She was lost in her thoughts, not knowing how to cope with this. One woman told how a special relationship had developed between her and the empress. The words seemed strange and distant, but there was a hidden meaning in them that Anna tried to understand. It would be really nice if the late empress was still around. Anna felt empty from her absence, as if some important part of the world had gone. The woman noticed that if she thought about it carefully, Ivon reminded her of the empress. It was a strange observation, but Anna could not shake the feeling that there was something true in these words. Although this place seemed very boring and uninteresting, Ivon understood that he had to be here for the sake of respect. The woman added that his appearance and abilities were beyond the ordinary perception. It all reminded her of Manish's diaries, his rise, his path in history. He was the one who left a mark, and she couldn't help but notice the similarities that now haunted her. Anna began to cry, realizing that perhaps Ivon was that very Manish. But before she could finish her thoughts, the prince himself spoke the words, beating her to it. At this moment, the crown prince entered the room, and all attention immediately turned to him. His presence was noticeable, he radiated power, and everyone immediately felt his importance. The woman bowed to the prince and, feeling awkward, apologized for her words. She immediately realized that her statements may have been inappropriate, and she did not mean to offend him. But the guy calmly replied that there was no need to worry. It didn't bother him. He admitted that his brother was truly an exceptional person and didn't go into details. The woman was taken aback. She didn't even know how to respond to this, feeling that there was more hidden meaning in her words than she had originally assumed. Ivan noticed that his brother seemed to be completely absorbed in his thoughts, and his behavior became cold as ice. This made him wary, because usually there was no such coldness. His brother was always more open. The atmosphere in the room had soured, and although everyone had expected the evening to end on something warmer, the brother remained tense. He was in no hurry to leave, as if he was attached to his silence and inner conflict. Ivon realized that the best thing to do was to leave him alone. He decided to get some fresh air, hoping that it would relieve the tension. Maybe later, when his brother calmed down a bit, they could talk. It was probably the best decision. The place was pretty dull anyway, lifeless and joyless, and it was useless to expect any progress in conversation. At least there was more space for thought outside. In fact, Ivon couldn't help but notice that his brother was not only worried about external circumstances, but was also worried about something deeper. Something personal, hidden from everyone, was tormenting him. It wasn't clear what exactly was bothering him so much. Ivon couldn't understand why his brother was so stubbornly clinging to Dedtron when his status as an archduke of the imperial family would have been enough for him. Ivon had never known the fear his brother felt. He was born and raised in Kagadan, a country that had risen to greatness thanks to the might of Manish. This Manish eventually became emperor, and the country experienced glorious victories. Cadogan used his talents and skills to unite the neighboring kingdoms, turning them into an empire. His abilities allowed him to greatly strengthen his power, and now his influence was felt everywhere. The question of who would become the crown prince was important, but it all depended on the situation. Prince Ivon knew that his place in the future was already determined. If Manish appeared on the horizon, he would have to give up his position. The years passed, and now 7 years have passed since the day when everything changed at the coming-of-age ceremony. At that ceremony, it was revealed that Ivon was not a Manish. This discovery shocked many, because every Manish had to awaken at the moment of coming of age, and his role was predetermined. But Ivon's brother had always mistrusted him, suspecting him of ulterior motives. However, Ivon himself never aspired to become emperor. He saw no point in it and was far from the ambitions that made his brother fight for power. He did not seek triumph and did not want to seize the throne, despite the complexity of the situation. Ivon's brother, on the contrary, was hungry for power. This rush to the throne gave him insecurity, as well as an inferiority complex that prevented him from coming to terms with reality. He could not accept that his brother was deprived of this title and sought to go his own way. One day, Ivon noticed a figure below. He was intrigued. Who is it? It was something unusual that caught his attention as soon as he noticed it. The girl standing below was clearly not a member of the aristocracy. Her modest clothing betrayed her belonging to the common class. Perhaps she was an ordinary commoner, but this only fueled Ivon's interest in her. However, her outfit did not resemble a maid's uniform, which meant that she had been brought here by one of the noble ladies. This opened up even more questions. Who was she really? What brought her to this shore at this moment? Ivon began to wonder what could be behind her interest in the lake. It wasn't just affection for the fish. Perhaps there was something more significant hidden in her gaze. Maybe it wasn't as simple as it seemed at first glance. It was a very familiar outline, and without thinking, he peered at it, trying to understand who could be in front of him. The silhouette seemed strangely close to him, as if he had seen it before. At that moment, the girl turned to him, and suddenly he realized who it was. Only at that moment did he realize exactly who was standing in front of him, recognizing her from thousands of other people. He was sure it was her. Ivon smiled, and the maid returned the gesture, smiling. It was simple and meant nothing. However, something in her gaze made him feel that there was something more to it. He sighed, realizing it was just a maid, and almost gave in to temptation. There was nothing in her eyes that could entice him. He decided that he would not give in to this temptation. Perhaps one night could have changed a lot. But in the meantime, Anna called Deborah to distract herself from her thoughts. She was too busy to pay attention to what was happening around her. In fact, Anna wasn't looking at the prince. Her gaze was directed towards her friend. Deborah had already said that she was going down, and Anna was waiting for her return. There was no interest in the man in her eyes. Then, Ivon realized that the girl hadn't noticed him at all. She didn't even seem to glance in his direction, completely focused on her friend. He suddenly felt unimportant and unnecessary. At that moment, Ivon realized that he was actually lower than her friend Deborah. He was part of something he couldn't understand or feel. At that moment, he felt helpless. Ivon couldn't help but laugh at this absurd situation. He laughed loudly, realizing that he was in a rather awkward position. It was funny, and despite the awkwardness, the laughter came out of itself. It was the first time a woman had said that he looked so much like the empress. She had not paid attention to his title or personality, but only to his appearance, which made Ivon wonder how others perceived him. He knew he was getting more and more public attention, and it felt good. There was a growing sense inside him that he was being noticed, that he was being envied. But all this was hidden behind the facade of his own calm. He never doubted his existence, knowing that his place in this world was not in question. He was sure that his role was already predetermined, and nothing could change his destiny or his ideas about himself. He couldn't believe that he would be ignored. His gaze darted to her, but there was no sign that she noticed him. It was as if she hadn't even heard him. He smiled, taking her silence for a misunderstanding, since it was undoubtedly Anna. However, she showed no reaction, continuing her work as if he was not there. He tried to justify her behavior, deciding that she simply did not notice him. He was sure that no matter how she tried to hide behind her indifference, it was still visible. She would start to pretend that she didn't care at all, but he would notice how her face would blush slightly when her gaze accidentally met his. Eventually, she couldn't hide her embarrassment. He always tried not to mention her name, especially when the prince was present, but she responded as if she hadn't noticed it. There was no concern on her part. He couldn't help but think that maybe her underwear was pink. The thought was running through his mind, because that was the shade he thought suited her perfectly. He imagined how his gift might be delivered, knowing that the value of his items now depended on how she received them. He hoped that she would appreciate his efforts and thoughts. He was absolutely sure that she deserved this gift. She deserved the best things, and he had no doubt that she understood it perfectly. The maid who managed to add bright colors to his boring and monotonous life brought not only warmth into his days, but also something new that he had not experienced for a long time. She couldn't understand what was going on. It was quite funny to watch her feelings, even though it had only been a month since she had appeared in his life. It wouldn't be a problem for her, because she had long been one of the prince's favorites. It was her place, and she saw no reason why things should change. When the girl returned home, there were 2 gifts in front of her, neatly wrapped, as if awaiting her attentive gaze. It was unexpected, but intriguing. She, in turn, could not understand what was hidden inside these packages. Everything was so strange that her surprise grew with each passing moment. She was stunned and could not understand where these gifts came from, because she never expected such a surprise. She could not understand who could send them to her. However, the box bore the marks of the imperial Sunday, and this could mean nothing other than that the gift came from someone who belonged to the dynasty. Perhaps these decorations were intended for Lady Natasha, because the box contained a very beautiful hairpin that could well suit her style. On the pin itself was an inscription, stating that it was a gift for a beautiful servant. The prince wanted to show his care and hoped that she would accept his gesture. The girl immediately realized that these gifts were sent by the prince himself. He seemed to remember her name and did not want her to feel forgotten or unremarkable. He was kind to her, despite her humble status as a servant. In his actions, she felt genuine attention and a desire to make her life at least a little brighter. The second gift was also a hairpin, and it was no less beautiful than the first. This was surprising, because 2 gifts for such an unremarkable girl seemed too generous. The second box did not contain a note, which raised even more questions. Why did the prince decide to give her two such luxurious pieces of jewelry? And what did he mean by that? Perhaps these gifts were a remembrance of the words the prince had spoken to her in the bookstore when they had met by chance, and it had not been just a chance meeting. She felt that something had happened, and because of this, she was embarrassed. Everything that was happening seemed a little strange and unpredictable to her. Confusion washed over her, and she could not understand what exactly caused such a reaction. The girl decided that she would definitely return it. She could not afford to leave such a thing unattended. Everything had to be returned as it was accepted. Otherwise, she would break her internal rules. This was too much for the maid. She knew she had to return everything she had, especially if it was more than she could afford. Otherwise, there would be unnecessary trouble and complicated consequences. Besides, it belonged to His Highness, and she couldn't understand that Prince Ivon would do something like that. It was strange and beyond what she would expect from him. Maybe he wanted to spend the night with her, which might indeed be typical of him. But she wasn't sure that was what he was after, and she didn't know how to take it. But despite this, the girl decided that her body was not something worth thinking about. Her thoughts should not be directed in such a direction, and she pushed all these ideas away, trying to focus on other issues. She just needed to return the thing and get rid of these thoughts, leaving everything behind. When the prince came at the right moment, she would return it to him, and only then, when it was necessary, everything would be done according to the rules. She was not to have anything left that did not belong to her. She was sure that no things, time, money, and especially feelings could be hers if they were not acquired by right. It all had to be strictly by her rules. No infractions, no attachments. Not her things, not her feelings, and she wasn't going to indulge in too much. Everything had to be under her control. The day of Natasha and the Marquis of Owen's engagement was a momentous occasion. The mansion had a special atmosphere. It was an event that reminded of the past, and the Countess looked truly magnificent, as if from another time. The man dreamed of all this happening again, and he believed that she should be worth more. His views were clear, and only the maid understood the full depth of what was happening. He was ready to act in his own way, and did not hide it. Anna had long since realized that her relationship with her son was far from ideal. The age difference of almost 40 years prevented them from becoming as close as she had hoped. The problems only became more obvious with each passing year. She noticed that Deborah always spoke loudly, without embarrassment. When Anna drew attention to this, the girl answered with a grin that let everyone hear. After all, she did not hide her opinion and was always right in her judgments. Anna was sure of one thing. Behind the lady's actions, there was a clear, well-thought-out plan. She knew that the lady would never leave the situation without control, and would always be ready for any turn of events. Anna decided to watch her every move closely. She felt that the lady could not simply give up. It was more important for her to see how everything would turn out and keep her finger on the pulse of what was happening. At some point, Anna realized that she needed to take stock. It was time to evaluate everything that had happened. She came to the conclusion that none of her plans had worked out as she had expected. However, in this process, an unexpected loss occurred. The note she was supposed to give to Benjamin disappeared. She couldn't understand how it happened, but now she had to think of another way to resolve the situation. They began to consider various scenarios, but the main question remained: what if His Highness, Ivon, decided to call off the engagement? Everyone began to worry because his decision was critical and his appearance was becoming less and less likely. Ivon stopped coming, stopped delivering letters, and the day of the engagement had already arrived. There was no news from him. Anna realized that she could no longer count on his help, and she had to accept this as a given. Since Ivon didn't come, Anna couldn't give him back the hairpin that had become a symbol of their connection. All that was left was to look for other ways. There was only one solution: to let all these people go and move on. Anne, as a loyal maid to her lady, once again found herself with a note to deliver to Benjamin Owen. She was well aware of the importance of this assignment, although she was not thrilled about carrying it out. Although the engagement had already taken place, the official wedding was still far away. It was all just a formality, but for everyone present, the ceremony was of great importance. Benjamin, despite his status, could have acted much less aristocratically. His actions, in fact, did not always correspond to the strict rules and expectations of representatives of his family. He could really be the man to save their Lady Cloud. He was always looking for an opportunity to demonstrate his determination and his courage at the right moment. After some thought, Ivon realized that it seemed he could finally come out of his ambush. His secrecy was starting to lose its meaning, and he was ready to move on. Finding himself in this situation, he realized how difficult it is to avoid meeting people. He just wanted to see Natasha with one glance, but unfortunately, this turned out to be a difficult task. Attending his ex's engagement party was not a good idea. Soon, rumors began circulating, and Ivon had no choice but to attend secretly to avoid unnecessary talk. He noticed a tree with pink flowers that was still blooming. For some reason, this sight caught his attention, and he couldn't understand why this particular path was the best one for him. He may have ended up here by chance, but his steps had led him to this place. He wasn't sure if it was just a coincidence. It was as if this place was calling him. To be honest, Ivon himself couldn't say for sure whether he had come here to look at Natasha. His intentions were vague, and he himself wasn't ready to admit his feelings. He decided that he would not rush to conclusions and just enjoy the moment. Let everything go its own way. Time itself would put everything in its place, and he would simply stop rushing. In any case, according to his plan, she would eventually belong to him. It was only a matter of time, and he had already stopped visiting this place, knowing that everything would be decided at the right moment. Everything else depended on Natasha. He realized that she would have to decide how things would go with his request. But it was also important that smoking was strictly prohibited here. If he did decide to smoke a cigarette, he would have to find another place to do it. He was reminded of this immediately when he entered the territory. Soon, Phoebe, Natasha's niece, appeared behind the building. She walked towards him with a light step, and he noticed her as she came closer. He asked her to make an exception for him, because he was in a difficult situation, but the girl politely refused. She seemed a little confused, but firm in her decision. Then he declared that he was a prince, and a prince was much higher than a count. He decided that this should influence her decision, despite her young age. Phoebe was very surprised to hear this, and the gentleman noted that this could be quite a serious revelation for her. After all, according to him, the prince is much higher than the count in the hierarchy. Realizing that her behavior might have been wrong, Phoebe exclaimed that, if that was the case, he could smoke here. Her voice sounded a little hesitant, but it was clear that she had given in. He assumed she might want something sweet too, and pulled out a candy. Old-fashioned etiquette rules didn't always apply in this setting, and he hoped to please her. Phoebe was incredibly happy when she noticed the candy in his hand. She immediately smiled, accepted it with gratitude, and almost could not contain her delight. However, he reminded her with a light laugh that her aunt had once said that you shouldn't accept treats from strangers. But he still decided to make an exception, since that was the way the circumstances had turned out. Ivon noticed that he didn't think it was terrible that his unknown prince had attracted the girl's attention. He thought that her aunt would easily agree to this act, and the girl would undoubtedly be delighted. He confirmed that it was true, and the girl expressed her gratitude by smiling and thanking him for his attention. Ivon assumed that the girl lived here, without thinking about other options, and considering that it was quite natural that she was here. Phoebe told him that she lived there with her aunt, and then Ivon became interested in why she was alone, thinking that there might have been a quarrel between them. The girl replied that they had not quarreled. Her aunt had problems that she was trying to solve, but in fact, she had quarreled with Alice, and this was the cause of her distress. Ivon became interested in the reason for the quarrel with his friend. Phoebe lowered her eyes and began to tell, trying to hide her tears, as if she was unable to cope with her emotions. When she said the name Alice, her voice broke and she began to cry, unable to contain the emotions associated with that moment. Ivon realized that he had touched on a painful topic and, perhaps, had crossed that fine line that he shouldn't have crossed in a conversation with a girl. Phoebe was still crying and revealed that Alice claimed she had a mother and not an aunt, which added to her extra pain and confusion. She said that Alice should have a mother, but she doesn't envy her at all. It's much more important to her that her aunt stays close and is her real person. Phoebe continued, saying that her aunt was much kinder, smarter, prettier, and also much better than those she considered her family. At some point, Ivon, seeing her despair, took the girl in his arms, trying to at least console her a little in this difficult moment filled with emotions. The girl confidently said that she really thought so, but added that one should not be angry with other mothers. This lesson was taught to her by her aunt, who always taught her to be kind. She noticed that Alice mentioned that Phoebe had no mother. The prince took care of the girl and, as a sign of attention, gave her a handkerchief that calmed her down and gave her a feeling of warmth. The prince replied that everything would be fine and that Phoebe would be able to cope without her mother, because she was old enough to adapt to new circumstances. Everything would be fine. The girl smiled happily, and Ivon, looking at her, said that he himself had once grown up with a nanny. He was sure that she would grow up good and strong, despite the absence of a mother figure. The prince gently advised her not to cry and to continue enjoying the candies, because he still had a whole pack. He wanted the girl to feel calmer and happier. Ivon noted that this little girl was very cute, and he enjoyed watching her innocent games. Her smile gave him some unusual feeling of warmth and joy. There was something strangely familiar about her features. Ivon couldn't figure out what it was, but the feeling didn't leave him. He felt that this meeting had some special meaning. He turned to the girl and, after thinking for a moment, said that he wanted to ask her something from her aunt. He hoped that she would be willing to share important information with him. Ivon asked the girl if it was true that her aunt was really beautiful. He was a little puzzled because he couldn't quite figure out what feelings were tormenting him about her family. The man grabbed the girl's hand and told her not to move. He told her to comfort him, but the girl tried to explain that she couldn't do that because she was a maid or Natasha. If she disappeared, Benjamin would notice her disappearance, because to him she was just an ordinary servant. He would not be surprised even if she disappeared without a trace. It would not be strange to him. She didn't want to say anything, but Benjamin insisted, claiming that he needed someone to take his anger out on. She knew that in his eyes, she was just a convenient target for his frustrations and anger. She couldn't understand how his feelings could change so much. He, whom she once loved with all her heart, now treated her like a new mother, and it was a complete shock to her. He was truly out of his mind. Benjamin Owen was not the support that Mrs. Natasha had expected. He was no different from Arnold Owen, perhaps even worse, and his behavior was becoming increasingly aggressive and unreasonable. In a panic, she began to scream for help, her cries breaking the silence. She desperately tried to get attention, hoping that someone would hear her and save her, but she knew that she was alone in this nightmare. But instead of helping, he walked up to her and started hitting her, throwing her to the floor. His words that she was just a crazy girl cut her heart. He left her no chance of salvation. He ordered everyone to leave and not to come in. He locked the door, as if her presence was unbearable to him, and her suffering did not bother him. He made everyone leave, leaving her completely alone and afraid. Anna couldn't understand why she had to endure all this. It was unfair, and her soul, filled with pain, couldn't find an explanation for why she had to go through such a test, full of humiliation and fear. Maybe it was because she was a maid, or maybe it was because she was now a servant with no right to protection. Her situation was clear, but it didn't help her cope with what was happening. Anna felt like her life was hanging by a thread. She was helpless and could not afford herself any emotions or rights. Every step she took was dictated by circumstances she could not control. Her position did not allow her to enjoy what other members of the nobility had. All her opportunities and freedoms were limited by the boundaries of her existence as a subordinate. Anna realized that she was completely defenseless in this world, where she had no room to maneuver. She was completely dependent on those around her. At that moment, the window suddenly broke, and she heard her niece's voice, which made her heart tremble. At that moment, Anna realized that help had come from an unexpected side. Among the broken glass, she saw a man whose hair was a familiar shade. There was something about his appearance that made her heart flutter, although she couldn't quite place it. It was His Highness Ivon, the same man who had entered her life long ago and left a mark on it, even if Anna herself could not express exactly how it happened. He grabbed Benjamin abruptly, and he, not expecting an attack, became very scared. His face was distorted with fear, and his eyes sparkled with confusion and anxiety. However, Ivon easily threw Benjamin aside, and at the same moment, Phoebe rushed to her aunt, ready to protect her. It was her first attempt to help in such a critical situation. Suddenly, a servant burst into the room and tried to stand in Ivon's way, intending to stop him. But his attempt looked too weak and hopeless in the presence of a high-born man. Ivon, ignoring the servant, coldly ordered him to remain where he was, without moving. His words were full of threat, and everyone in the room felt the tension emanating from his voice. He emphasized that if the servant did not want to be next in this chain of punishment, then it was better for him not to interfere in what was happening. Fear was in the air, and everyone was on edge. Ivon had absolutely no idea what was going on or why he was here. He felt uneasy, but his mind couldn't process all the information quickly, which led to confusion. He looked at Anna and couldn't understand why she was crying all the time. It irritated him, although he didn't know what exactly was behind her tears, or why there were so many of them. Benjamin, deciding to muster up his courage, could not help but ask the prince what he was doing at that moment. He could not understand why such an important person was next to him at that moment. He also couldn't understand who this prince was to threaten him and try to stop him. Benjamin couldn't understand how someone could decide another person's fate in such a way. He was shocked and confused. Even his eyes were wide open in surprise. Everything that was happening seemed absurd to him, and he could not recognize the authority of the prince standing before him. The prince, without showing any emotion, approached Benjamin and, looking calmly at him, asked if he was aware of who was standing before him, and if he knew that this was Natasha's maid, who was being discussed. Benjamin admitted that he knew the girl, but stressed that he had done nothing to her. Ivon, in turn, noted that a person with Benjamin's status should be at least a little ashamed of such behavior. The prince, continuing the conversation, asked what would happen if the girl decided to seek compensation for what had happened to her. He hinted that the consequences could be very serious for the one who had offended her. Benjamin, not understanding the essence of the question, waved it off and said that he had no idea what the prince was talking about. He was sure that the maid herself went to him, and he was not to blame for what happened. However, Ivon, remaining calm and confident in his words, emphasized that his statement was just an empty excuse. If he, the prince, took the girl's side, the consequences could be unpleasant for Benjamin if the case went to court. He was interested in what compensation Benjamin was willing to offer. After all, it turned out that he was going to marry her, and this changed many plans. It was curious to what extent he would go for it. He also noticed that Benjamin had expressed concerns about being isolated from society if he decided to marry the maid, which only fueled his suspicions about how worried he was. He believed that this was the moment when he could destroy everything he had recently tried to build. The prince knew that his actions could be a catalyst for great change for everyone, so he tried to stay calm and not let himself interfere too much in other people's affairs. There were moments when he wanted to interfere, but he knew he had to keep his cool. Objectively speaking, it would be better for her if she were an imperial maid rather than just a servant in the house. Right now, he could only observe the situation, unable to directly intervene. All she could do was wait quietly for him. He knew the Baldwins would fall sooner or later, and she had to be ready for that moment. He was saving her for himself, as an important part of his plan. Instead of risking her life on a minor mission, she needed to stay in the shadows. Soon he would take her, and then everything would change. Her life would be much simpler and safer. He promised her that she would live next to him without worrying about anything. Natasha's engagement was called off, and all this happened thanks to the actions of the knights, who detained Benjamin, accusing him of using drugs. Because he was the son of a groom involved in fraud, the ceremony had to be suspended. All that remained were the external decorations, which were more reminiscent of what had not taken place. Meanwhile, the maids spent the rest of the day in anxiety. The gossip about the cancelled ceremony only grew stronger, and many began to discuss the fact that the master had not reported the incident personally. They found themselves in a situation that was a carefully planned trap, designed specifically for Mr. Benjamin. It was too obvious, and he found himself in the middle of it, unaware of the consequences that were to come. Only one person remained calm in the midst of this chaos, and she, despite her efforts, could not find peace. She continued to lie awake, thinking about what had happened, trying to calm her inner anxiety. Fig, realizing the gravity of the situation, was very worried about her, but as soon as she managed to close her eyes and fall asleep, she felt relief. Sleep seemed to be a salvation that brought peace. If it weren't for her friends, this night would have been even more difficult. They assured her that they could cope without her help, leaving her the opportunity to at least rest a little and not worry about what was happening. Thanks to her friends' support, she was able to leave work a little earlier, wash herself in peace, and calm Phoebe down, which was important for her condition. It was a moment when she felt grateful for their help. At that moment, she realized how lucky she was. Without their help, she would not have been able to cope with the situation that was so stressing her out and leaving her with a feeling of anxiety that for a moment made her lose faith in herself. Nothing terrible had happened in the end, although she couldn't help but think about how it could have ended. There was this anxiety in her thoughts that still echoed in her head, but everything was fine. In the end, she realized that there were no other reasons. Even if she had to lie at work, she would not doubt it. Sometimes the truth was too painful and offensive to speak about it openly. Anna couldn't hold back her tears when the thought came to her mind that maybe it was magic. Her brain couldn't hold back her anxiety, and her thoughts went far away to where reality intertwined with her own fears. When she looked up at the sky, which was amazingly blue and clear, bright blonde hair appeared in her field of vision, as if something extraordinary and magical was manifesting at that moment. It was mysterious and strange. It was because of her that he was in danger, but you could see the determination in his eyes. She felt like he was like a savior sent by God himself to intervene in the situation and change its course. She wanted him so much to be there, to be at home, safe, where a knight with a smile could defeat a villain. This was her wish, her dream, where everything ended happily and everything was in its place. At that moment, Anna, looking at him, could not hide the sadness in her eyes. Something in her heart had a presentiment that this story was ending. He began to talk about marriage, and this pulled her even more into the abyss. But Ivon intervened, firmly forbidding the conversation to continue. He felt his heart clench at the thought that their relationship could reach such a stage. The knight, dreaming of a romantic fairy tale, hoped that everything that was said would not fall upon him, that his dreams would not destroy the fragile reality that was taking shape around him. In this story, Anna was no longer a princess, but rather a snake, tempting and alluring a nobleman. She saw herself in a different role, in a different reality, full of temptations and difficult choices. She didn't understand what she could leave behind, and even more so, she didn't realize that her name could remain in memory, like a shadow that disappeared without a trace, and even she herself was doubtful about this. It was a shame, but despite all this pain, she continued to hope for something impossible. It was as if she forgot that she was actually just a servant whose presence no one noticed. Anna, as expected, understood that she had to return the gift. Everything she received at that moment became part of someone else's life, someone else's dreams. She knew that this gift had no place in her life. She was reassured that it was not too late to deal with what she was feeling, and the fact that her expectations were unlikely to match reality. This was the moment when she needed to let go of illusions. When Anna opened the closet, she couldn't understand what had happened. Things were scattered, as if someone had broken into her personal space and turned everything upside down. It was a mess that had no explanation. The room was in chaos. Every detail was broken, every object was out of place. It was strange and disturbing, but she didn't know how to explain it. Anna looked for her hairpin, but it was nowhere to be found. It was the only thing she couldn't find in this mess. Questions flashed through her head, but they remained unanswered. Anna was not the only one to experience loss. Other maids also complained about missing valuables, necklaces given to them as birthday presents by their mothers. This was no simple misunderstanding. Earrings, the jewelry they valued so much, were also missing. The maids reported these losses, and now it was necessary to make a list of what was stolen, assess the damage, figure out what and how much was lost. She couldn't describe it all to the end, because this gift was from the prince himself. It was a gift that not everyone would be given, and its meaning was hidden behind the external simplicity. She overheard a maid talking about how the Marquis of Owen's maids might have been involved. Such talk should not have been overheard, but it left her wondering. Of course, the circumstances of the war could have misled Anna, and she knew that sometimes perceptions could be distorted. But for some reason, she did not believe that this was the work of the Marquise or other petty thieves. Of all the things she had lost, the ones she missed the most were the ones that didn't seem particularly valuable at first glance. It was strange that they were the ones that had disappeared, and there was something disturbing and inexplicable about it. It felt like someone was deliberately targeting her things, her. And if her suspicions were correct, then everything that was happening was not an accident, but a carefully planned scheme. Underneath her thoughts and feelings, there was the image of His Highness the Crown Prince. He still did not leave her alone. Despite all his attempts to avoid attention, his gaze remained aimed at her. Natasha, noticing that Anna was absorbed in her thoughts, approached her and asked what she was thinking about. She could see that something was bothering her friend, and it did not leave her indifferent. Anna was a little embarrassed and, apologizing, admitted that it was her fault because she was distracted. Perhaps she did not notice how her thoughts carried her far from everything happening around her. Natasha mentioned that she had heard about how her mistress had almost gotten into trouble. She understood how such a thought could not go away, and the girl could simply become fixated on what had happened. Although Natasha thought that her mistress was sad, she was still surprised by what she heard. Her words sounded unexpected, and Natasha did not expect such confessions from her at that moment. At the same time, Natasha couldn't help but remark. It seemed to her that the lady was simply incredibly lucky in life. After all, if you think about it, she could follow in her mother's footsteps and become a real marquise. Not everyone has that opportunity. When she combed Natasha's hair, the movements could be a little harsh, and Natasha sometimes felt pain. But Natasha immediately broke into a smile and added that all this, of course, was just a joke and should not be taken seriously. During the day, Prince Ivon himself was supposed to come to them, and therefore it was necessary to carefully tidy up the lady's hair in order to look dignified. Deborah sat down on the bench next to Anna and casually said that Annie had given her something that might be important. It turned out to be a cookie, and the girl smiled and remarked that she could now eat it calmly, since it was intended for her. Anna thanked him for the treat and was about to take the cookies to her niece, but Deborah stopped her, saying that the treat was also intended for the lady herself. She should try it herself first. Anna assured her friend that she was completely fine and expressed her sincere gratitude for the attention and care that had so unexpectedly appeared at that moment. Then, changing the subject slightly, Deborah reminded everyone that today was Wednesday, as if she were leading up to some important announcement or event that was expected on that particular day. She added that her brother had promised to show up during the day to bring fresh produce, as he sometimes did when he had some free time. Anna was slightly surprised to hear this, but quickly realized that Deborah had brought up the topic with a different intention. She was interested in her friend's opinion about her brother Matteo. Deborah, as if defending herself from possible bewilderment, said that she was simply curious. Even if Anna had said that she had a husband, that would have been the end of it. At the same time, Deborah in no way insisted on marriage. She knew that strange, even disturbing things had happened to her friend in recent years, and she respected her choice. But if someone appears in Anna's life who can truly protect her, then she will no longer have to constantly live in fear and expectation of trouble. This person doesn't have to be Matteo. If Anna has at least someone she trusts and who can protect her, then it's better not to miss this chance. Anna froze for a moment, noticing how a tear slowly rolled down her friend's cheek. She was genuinely surprised that Deborah, usually strong and reserved, suddenly could not contain her emotions. Deborah quietly asked if she could tell the truth. At first she had envied Anna's beauty, but now she was increasingly worried about her, as if she were the closest and dearest. Anna herself is not to blame for what is happening. It's just that the people around her have become so evil and cruel that even a strong girl finds it difficult to withstand the constant pressure and gaze of strangers. Anna was shocked by the frankness, and Deborah added that she was saying all this out of anger and anxiety. If something had happened between Anna and Matteo, she would have felt at least a little calmer. She was tormented by the fact that she had not done anything concrete then, because she could have at least hinted or gently nudged her friend, but she was afraid of offending her or seeming intrusive. Deborah felt incredibly ashamed of her indecision. She was worried that she had missed the moment when she could have said at least a word, but she remained silent, leaving her friend in the dark. In order to somehow smooth out the atmosphere, she slowly approached Anna, sat closer and tried to smile, trying to give a little warmth, which was so lacking now. But before giving her support, she advised Anna to tidy herself up, because there were traces of tears on her face, and they should be carefully wiped away. Anna, as if awakening from her anxious thoughts, assured her friend with a soft smile that everything was really fine with her, and that no worries had power over her now. Deborah, touched by her words, hugged Anna, and with gentle irony called her a fool, as if reminding her that she was still very dear to her, despite everything. Deborah couldn't calm down for a long time. Tears rolled down her cheeks, one after another, and then, pulling herself together, she confidently declared that she would do some of Anna's work for her, so that she could rest. When Anna went to run one of the errands that Deborah used to do, she unexpectedly ran into Matteo, her friend's brother, whom she had not seen for some time. Matteo, as always, was calm and confident. In conversation, he mentioned that he had recently bought something nice, a gift not only for his niece, but also for Anna herself. Anna was genuinely surprised by his gesture. She had never expected Matteo to make her happy, and she couldn't understand why he would even show such attention. The gift turned out to be truly beautiful and even exquisite. It was obvious that it was chosen with soul, and this confused Anna even more, forcing her to think about the reasons. After their meeting, when Matteo said goodbye, Anna's friend's words came to mind, the very ones where Deborah asked her what she thought about her brother. These memories prompted Anna to think. She tried to understand herself and understand how she really felt about Matteo and whether it was worth thinking about at all. But inside, she was sure that she didn't have to think about his feelings. She had enough troubles in her life without worrying about someone who had suddenly become so close. At the same time, Natasha, completely unrestrained, shouted irritably at Ivon, demanding an explanation. She was angry that he decided to interfere, and she did not understand what he was guided by at all. But Ivon again, more calmly, made it clear that he simply could not stand aside when he saw how the girl found herself in a difficult situation. For him, it was a matter of honor, an act of conscience. Natasha, still seething with anger, snapped that his action had ruined everything. Now rumors were circulating around the palace that it had been a prearranged trap aimed at Benjamin Owen. She reminded that if everything gets out of control, the consequences will be terrible. Although, according to her, Ivon himself understood perfectly well what all this could lead to and what he was going for. Despite the tension of the situation, Ivon was sure that their plan was thought out to the smallest detail and nothing could interfere with it. He asked Natasha to remain calm and not to panic. However, Natasha, still shocked, could not understand how exactly Ivon had changed in such a short time. He had become different, and this frightened her, because before he had not acted so decisively. Still, having calmed down a bit, she said that she understood his position and was ready to wait. She needed a little time to think it over and decide which way to go next. Deep down, Natasha knew that everything that was happening was part of a larger plan, and she would cope. Ivon asked an important question. Was there another path for her, other than the one they had already chosen? Natasha thought about her future, and told herself that this house would fall sooner or later, and she would start a new life by her own rules. Perhaps she would take only a maid with her as her only companion. She clearly realized that if she kicked Anna out, Ivon would not support her decision. Anna was smart and worthy, and Natasha understood that this was noticeable even to those who rarely acknowledged someone else's intelligence. In the morning, she couldn't hold back and snapped at Anna, spilling everything that had built up. Not because she was guilty, but because of the feeling that everything was falling apart because of her. She was shocked by how little she knew about people and their ambitions. She hoped that it might still work, that the plan she had chosen would lead to happiness, although deep down she knew that perhaps she was lying to herself. All she felt was a mixture of irritation, curiosity, and something that felt like a weak attempt to justify herself. It wasn't pure malice, but it wasn't kind either. Perhaps, in trying to hurt Anna, she unconsciously wanted to hurt herself. Ivon casually asked if she was going to take a maid with her if she decided to leave. Natasha was a little surprised by his interest, but quickly replied that perhaps she would like to take the maid with her. This gave her a sense of at least some certainty. Then, Ivon confidently noted that, given her character and position, she would be able to get everything she wanted, even if it was two maids who were ready to be there at all times. Natasha smiled and noted that it would be difficult for her to live alone anyway. She would have to take at least a couple of smart maids who could support her in everyday life and thoughts. Ivon, trying to remain reserved, replied that this was most likely how it would be. However, Natasha caught a strange coldness in his voice and did not understand its cause. She looked at him carefully and asked with slight doubt where he had been looking all this time. Her words suggested an attempt to understand what was going on in his mind. The prince did not think long and calmly replied that he was not looking at anything special. He was simply looking out the window, as if trying to find answers to his thoughts there. Ivon gently reminded her that Natasha had not yet fully recovered, and this was evident from her behavior. He wanted to warn her not to make hasty conclusions and decisions. Natasha looked at the cup in front of her and noted with irony that the black tea in it seemed to be hinting that it needed to be brewed stronger, as if the tea reflected her inner state. Ivon quietly noticed that she had made a mistake again and advised her to call the maid. Perhaps she should rest a little and come to her senses with someone's caring help. When Anna came at the mistress's call, she hoped that everything was fine. This is not a bedroom, but a living room, so everything should be in order. She informed the lady that she had already brought tea. The lady said that she should come in and also noted that she and the gentleman had made a bet. Ivon didn't understand what she was talking about, and Natasha simply meant that he promised that he would remember the name of her maid. And then the gentleman asked what she wanted, and Natasha said that she needed a lot of things, but first she needed to know the results, whether he won or not. He pointed out that she could just call it a gift, and Natasha assumed that he would simply continue to defend his pride.